Chapter 1130. The sound did not come from the direction that Fong Bujue had passed by but from the direction that he had not explored. After the chanting, it was followed by footsteps. Pa, pa, par. This was not the sound of ordinary footsteps, but the sound of bare feet stepping on the ground. Damn, the barefoot has come to mess with me. Fong Bujue knew that something bad was about to happen just from the sound. In the nightmare mode scenario, especially with the setting that limited the player's power, being ambushed by a monster had a high chance of instant death. This was something that even players who did not have any experience in nightmare mode knew, much less someone like Fong Bujue, who came to nightmare mode every few days. Therefore, even though Brother Ju had a weapon that he could use, his first choice was to go into hiding. I should grab something that fits me. At that moment, Fong Bujue scanned the trolley and grabbed a weapon. Item name, scalpel. Item type, weapon quality, normal offense points, medium element, none special effect, none equip requirement, general ability E or medic mastery F. Can be taken out of the scenario, yes. Remark, long handle number 3, number 22 blade. Under the premise that he did not have any equipment or physical skills, this kind of normal quality, light and edged weapon was still very good. Of course, according to Fong Bujue's ranking of normal melee weapons, something like a scalpel could only be considered a T2 weapon. Ranked above it were baseball bats, golf clubs, benches, and watermelon knives. T3 would be kitchen knives, bricks, knuckles, and hammers. T4 would be frozen meat, scissors, beer bottles, shoe saws, walking sticks, and frying pans. T4 would be frozen meat, scissors, beer bottles, shoe saws, walking sticks, and frying pans. What kind of weapon is a T1 weapon? We all know that chainsaw. Pa, pa, par. The footsteps came closer and closer. Fong Bujue scanned the room, and there was really no place to hide. The cupboards in the room were too small, and even a primary school student would not be able to fit through them. The machines were not big enough to create any blind spots, and it was impossible to find a corner to hide in. After looking around, the only place he could go was behind the curtain. Therefore, Fong Bujue pulled back the curtain. Then, he saw a bed. On the bed, there was a head and a leg. Let's talk about the foot first. The foot was no longer moving because the fluorescent liquid in the foot had almost flowed out. It was just placed on the bed like an ordinary organ that had been removed. But the head was still alive. It was fixed to the frame of the bed by a few belts. Several tubes of different thickness and materials were connected to the bottom of its neck, and those tubes were connected to several devices by the bed. One of them was covered with a transparent shell. There was a rubber pump that was moving up and down rhythmically. It seemed to be an artificial lung. The other one was similar, but it was not filled with air, but with fluorescent liquid. When Fong Bujue pulled back the curtain, he found that the eyes of the head were already staring in his direction. It seemed that the head had already noticed that there was someone outside the curtain. His vision and hearing are still there. Fong Bujue looked at the head and thought, I don't know if he can still think, and I don't know if he is hostile to me. But he has already lost his vocal cords. Even if he wants to expose my location, it will be difficult for him to do so. While he was thinking, there was a sudden bang from behind him. There was no doubt that the barefoot person had pushed the door open and entered the room. Then, there was a long silence of 10 seconds. Fong Bujue, who had sneaked under the bed, did not need to look to know that the person who had just entered was scanning the room. Pa, pa. 10 seconds later, the footsteps were heard again. This time, it was heading straight to the bed. Rip. The curtain was violently pulled open, and a pair of skinny feet appeared in Brother Ju's line of sight. It was a pair of deformed feet. Not only were they skin and bones, but they also looked like they had been bitten by an animal. The skin on the feet was missing, and the bones were exposed. The toes of the 2 feet were also in a twisted state, but they maintained the balance of the feet in a strange way. If possible, Brother Ju really wanted to see the person's whole body. Unfortunately, from his angle, he could only see the feet. If he wanted to look up, he would have to poke his head forward. That was too risky and not worth it. Ugh! The barefoot man stood by the bed and let out a low groan. Then, he sniffed twice, like a hunting dog sniffing for the trail of its prey. Fortunately, the disinfectant smell in the room was very strong. Unless it was something with a strong smell like feces, the other smells were easily covered up. Ha! Ha ha! For some reason, after the barefoot man sniffed for a while, he suddenly laughed twice. His laughter sounded like that of a veteran who smoked industrial waste every day for decades. That hoarse voice of smoking and drinking made people want to spit out phlegm immediately. After laughing, the barefoot man turned around and left. After he walked a little further away, Feng Bujue made sure that he was still in the shadow and nodded slightly forward. At this time, Brother Ju could clearly see the body below the ribs. Overall, the guy was a mummy. Not only was his collarbone protruding, his skin was shriveled, and there were many parts of his body that were directly exposed to the bone. Perhaps it was because of the harmony factor. The bare-chested, shoeless monster still wore a pair of three-quarter pants. Your humble servant uses the degree of damage to differentiate the length of the pants for humanoid monsters in horror games. If it was damage to the thigh, it would be 1/4 pants. If it was only damaged to the bottom of the pants, it would be 9/4 pants, and so on. Bang! With the sound of the door being pushed open, the monster walked out. The barefoot man came in a hurry and left in a hurry. From the moment he entered the room to the moment he pushed open the door and left, it took less than a minute. However, this 1 minute was undoubtedly a terrifying experience for the person hiding under the bed, the nervousness of being discovered at any time, the fear that made the blood in the body go cold, the stifling feeling that made one's heart jump out of one's throat, but one didn't even dare to breathe loudly. It went to the room at the end of the corridor. However, Feng Bujue didn't have any of the above reactions. Looks like it's just a mutated human, and it's the kind of trash mutation that has a broken body. After experiencing this terrifying act of hiding, a normal person would usually heave a sigh of relief and hide under the bed until they couldn't hear the sound of the monster before coming out. However, Feng Bujue immediately thought of a counterattack. If I follow it quietly now and stab it in the back when it's unprepared, the success rate is definitely above 70%. With that in mind, Brother Ju used a smooth roll to slip out from under the bed. Then, he jumped up like a carp. Then, he quickly grabbed a bone saw from the trolley. With a bone saw in one hand and a scalpel in the other, he ran toward the door. Seeing this, even Human Head, who was fixed to the bed frame, showed a shocked expression. 3 seconds later, without making a sound, Brother Ju used his shoulder to push the door open and returned to the corridor. "He sure is fast," Brother Ju muttered under his breath. At this time, the barefoot man had already turned the corner in front of him. Based on the sound of his footsteps, he was heading toward the room with the door still locked. At this speed, I should be able to catch up to him in about 30 seconds. Feng Bujue continued to remain silent. He took large strides on the ground and shortened the distance between him and the man. However, just as he was about to turn the corner and was about to dash out, bang! There was a loud noise. The sound was similar to a car rear end, and it was the kind that went over 70 kilometers per hour. At that moment, Feng Bujue instinctively realized something. He quickly stopped and didn't take that crucial step. Bang! 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 Then, there were 4 consecutive loud noises. Then, there was the sound of a heavy metal plate hitting the concrete floor. What the F***ck? Half a second after he heard the sound, Feng Bujue cursed in his heart. He finally realized that the series of noises just now was the sound of the barefoot man knocking on the door. If the man had only broken the door lock, it would have been fine, but judging from the sound, the man had probably knocked down the entire door. Thinking about the thickness of the metal door and looking down at his own body, Feng Bujue licked his lips and decided to retreat. After a while, Human Head, who had watched Brother Ju leave with a shocked expression, looked at Brother Ju with a confused expression as he returned to the room and crawled under the bed. To make a long story short, after holding the surgical tools for 5 minutes under the bed, the barefoot man's footsteps passed by the corridor outside the door again. He must have finished searching the room at the end of the corridor, so he turned back. This time, Feng Bujue waited until the man's footsteps completely disappeared. After a full 3 minutes, he rolled out from under the bed. Sigh. You really can't judge a book by its cover. He stood up and whispered to himself, "This is Mr. Aha's body, Cain Bloodhoof's power." After Brother Ju finished complaining, he turned back to look at Human Head. Then, he leaned close to him and said, "Blink once for yes, and blink twice for no. Do you understand?" His first sentence was very purposeful. 2 seconds later, Brother Human Head also blinked his eyes hard, indicating that he understood. "You still have your rationality." After Feng Bujue said that, he left. This time, Human Head was confused again. He thought that Brother Ju would communicate with him through blinking, but he did not expect Brother Ju to just confirm a question and leave. "Don't worry, I'll come find you in a bit. You go first." Looks like you can only wait." Feng Bujue seemed to be able to read the man's mind. Before he left, he turned back to tell Human Head. After saying that, he returned to the corridor and rushed all the way to the room that was locked earlier. Based on Brother Ju's analysis, there were 3 meanings to the earlier scenario. 1. It was to introduce the main boss of this scenario. 2. It was to create a scare. And 3. It was to have the boss open a door for the players. So far, this is still a typical linear scenario. There are no extra choices, and there are no side quests. Feng Bujue thought as he reached the door of the room. Therefore, I should follow the direction that the plot leads me to. There is an 80% chance that I will not go wrong. With the help of the light in the corridor, Feng Bujue could roughly see what was inside the room. It was a square room about 5 meters long, smaller than the room that Brother Ju had been in earlier. By then, the metal door of the room had been knocked away and fell to the ground. In the middle of the room stood a large shadow, and it was motionless. Is this a statue? Feng Bujue stepped through the door cautiously and reached out to touch the wall next to the door. As he expected, there was a light switch at a position similar to the first room. TSK. After he flipped the switch, the second room lit up. What appeared before Feng Bujue was indeed a statue. The statue was about 2 meters tall, and the main body was that of a worker in uniform. There was nothing strange about its base and body, but the neck of the statue did not have a human head but a set of tools. The tools included an axe, a sickle, a hammer, and pliers. There was nothing out of the ordinary about it. Other than that, there were words carved into the base of the statue. Feng Bujue walked closer to take a look and saw that it said, "Talent is the most important thing in production." Next to it was a year, 1927. This is. When the words entered his sight, a set of information flashed across Brother Ju's mind. This is bad. The next second, he quickly turned around and moved his gaze away from the statue. However, TSK. It seems like it's too late. Then, he muttered under his breath and quickly strode toward the third room, which was the room where Brother Human Head was. Human Head saw that Feng Bujue had returned so quickly and was confused again. However, this was only the beginning of Feng Bujue's strange behavior. After returning to his room, Feng Bujue completely ignored Rintu, who was lying on the bed. He started to rummage through the drawers and successfully found a fountain pen, a bottle of ink, and a stack of paper. Then, he moved a stool and sat in front of a piece of equipment. He laid the paper on top of it and started writing a novel. Yes, he was writing a novel in a nightmare mode solo game. Not only was he writing, but he was also writing happily. Human Head, who was lying on the hospital bed, was confused by Feng Bujue's enthusiasm. He had no idea what Feng Bujue was doing. The system did not judge Brother Ju's behavior as AFK-like, but allowed him to continue writing. Therefore, in this strange environment, Feng Bujue spent a whole 3 hours writing his novel. After 3 hours, his expression suddenly turned cold, and he put down the pen in his hand. He lowered his head and looked at his red and swollen knuckles. He let out a long sigh and said, it finally lost its effect. Chapter 1131. Phew! I thought I was dead for sure. After Feng Bujue put down his pen, he slumped into his chair. In the end, I wasn't judged as AFKing, and no monster came to mess with me in the past 3 hours. He mumbled to himself as he looked at the papers in front of him. It feels like this is a blessing in disguise. Indeed, for Feng Bujue, who had not written for a few days, the content he wrote in the past 3 hours was a waste of time. With his memory, it would not be difficult for him to rewrite the draft he wrote here after going offline. He could even proofread and edit the draft while he was rewriting. How about, I go and take a look at it again? That was the thought that crossed Brother Ju's mind. However, after some consideration, he gave up on the idea. The attack 3 hours ago was unexpected and impossible to guard against. However, if he were to look at the statue again, it would be obvious that he was doing it on purpose. Brother Ju deduced that if he really did that, the second attack would most likely trigger an AFKing evaluation. I should ignore it for now and explore the plot. Feng Bujue made up his mind. After all, as long as I know the theory behind the SCP project, I should be able to guard against it. Obviously, Brother Ju already knew the truth about the statue. When he saw the words printed on the base of the statue, a piece of information automatically appeared in his memory: project code, SCP-1011 project grade, safe special containment measure. SCP-1011 is placed in Hall 07 of Site 45. The entrance is guarded by 2 guards 24/7 to prevent SCP-1011 from being removed. The monthly executions of D-grade personnel working in Site 35 will be postponed until the organization fully understands the effects of SCP-1011. The substance produced in the experiment seems to lack abnormal properties. Application for non-critical applications will be approved according to document CSG-0371-N. Description: SCP-1011 is a statue about 2 meters tall and weighs about 4,200 kilograms. It depicts a worker whose head has been replaced with various tools. The pedestal is engraved with the words, "Talent is the most important factor in production," and the year 1927. Material analysis shows that the composition of this project is ordinary scrap steel and contains 2.3 Wt% carbon. The abnormal property of SCP-1011 will take effect when it is seen by a human tester. The human tester must perform no less than 3 hours of productive labor after seeing the item. The effect will gradually increase as it is further exposed to the item. Preventing exposure to SCP-1011 seems to be enough to stop the test subject from being affected. Currently, the degree of influence has been divided into 4 stages. In Phase 1, the tester, referred to as SCP-1011-1, will show an increase in morale and satisfaction. They will volunteer to work overtime and focus on their work goals. At this stage, SCP-1011-1 will stop all activities except for work, sleep, and the satisfaction of basic physiological need. Approximately data blocked. After a month, SCP-1011-1 will show a tendency to be unwilling to use personal safety equipment, such as helmets, gloves, or safety goggles. At this time, it can be confirmed that SCP-1011-1 has entered Phase 2. When asked, SCP-1011-1 will say that these tools are unnecessary and restrictive. At this stage, SCP-1011-1 will gradually give up on using tools and prefer to use their own bodies to complete their work, even if there is a risk of minor injuries. This stage will last for at least, data-blocked, month. Phase 3 can be confirmed by SCP-1011-1 suffering from insomnia. The testers will gather together and stare at SCP-1011 to replace sleep. They will stare at the item for a long time without moving for an average of 3 hours per day. The effect of Phase 2 will also be strengthened in this stage, evolving into completely abandoning the use of tools and machines. They will actively use teamwork to replace the work of machines with humans. At this stage, SCP-1011-1's body will start to transform into a form that can facilitate their work goals and ignore pain. The duration of this stage has not been confirmed. In the only known record, the situation caused by SCP-1011 has entered Phase 4, the final stage. At this stage, SCP-1011-1 will use each other as production materials, causing the affected factory's population to sharply decrease. Although the Foundation has conducted a large number of experiments to find the conditions that may trigger this stage, their attempt to induce the final stage among the D-grade personnel of Site-35 has not been successful. Recovery record. On the data-blocked month data-blocked 1947, in front of the data-blocked steel mill, now Site-35, in the RSFSR, Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic of the Soviet Union, an official inspected the mill as part of a major award process in order to recognize the mill for its long record of being among the best in the world in terms of output. At this time, SCP-1011 attracted the Foundation's attention. Even so, before the Foundation attempted to take it in, the GRU, Soviet Army General Staff Intelligence Headquarters, Special Agent P. Psychotronics, Parapsychology, took the initiative to designate the entire factory as a restricted area, and then the Phase 4 phenomenon occurred. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the Foundation's special agent used the name of the Foundation's subsidiary company to purchase the closed and sold factory from the Russian Federation for, redacted, USD. They then built Site-35 around it. Feng Bujue clearly remembered the description of this SCP project. If he didn't remember it clearly, then this chapter might be missing a few hundred words, and that was not a situation I wanted to see. Okay. Let's get back to the topic. According to the detailed information of this SCP project, the information listed above has been revised and simplified by me. SCP-1011 appeared in the Soviet steel mill at the end of 1944. Earlier that year, the Wehrmacht, Nazi Wehrmacht, bombed the factory. After the bombing, people found the statue in the old warehouse of the factory, and the storage, transportation, and reservation records of the statue could not be found. After that, 3 years passed, until 1 month in 1947, the statue was taken over by a Soviet special agent. From that point in time until the end of the Cold War, the statue's whereabouts were a mystery. Feng Bujue went through all the information in his mind, and came to 3 conclusions. 1. The scenario world that he was in was the universe where the SCP Foundation was located. 2. The current era should be between 1947 and 1949. 3. The secret experiment base that he was in most likely belonged to the former Soviet Union's P organization. Of course, it might belong to a special organization that he did not know about. Since this is the Foundation's universe, then everything makes sense. Brother Ju sat on the chair and assumed his habitual thinking pose. He tapped his forehead lightly and slid his finger down the bridge of his nose. In the real world that I'm in, the Soviet Union's sleep experiment and the SCP Foundation belong to the category of horror or fantasy literature, but in this universe, these kinds of literary works with a certain degree of realism are all real. His finger slid to his chin, and he cupped his chin with his fist. But with that comes the problem. He turned his head to glance at Brother Rintu on the bed and thought, this universe has more than just black technology. Fantasy, science fiction, magic, religion, and so on. This place has everything. It's hard to tell what I'm dealing with in this scenario. With that in mind, he stood up and diverted part of his attention to conduct deductive reasoning, while the rest of his attention was placed on searching this room. This third room, let's call it the surgery room for now. There were quite a lot of things in the surgery room. Other than the tools that could be used to injure people, there were also quite a number of tools like alcohol, cotton, bandages, anesthetics, syringes, tweezers, and rubber tubes. After Feng Bujue sorted through these things, he picked out those that he thought would be useful. Those that were convenient to carry around, he placed them inside his shirt pocket, and those that were inconvenient to carry around, he placed them inside a toolbox. Then he started to look through the paper documents in the room, trying to find some useful information. This should work. Not long after, Feng Bujue found a stack of documents that were bound together inside one of the drawers. The title of the stack of documents was VNO 9. Looking at the first half of the document, one might think that it was a medical record, but after flipping through it, one would understand that instead of a medical record, it was more like an experiment log. October 21st, experiment body E107 was sent into the experiment room. The cancer cells in the experiment body have spread on a large scale, and the amputated right foot has also become infected and diseased. October 22nd, E107 received an injection of VNO 9. The injection dose was 10 milliliters. Within a few minutes after receiving the injection, the experiment body said that the pain in his body had subsided. Reading up to this point, Feng Bujue was basically certain that VNO referred to a drug, and the meaning of the -9 was worth pondering over. Generally speaking, it meant that there were 8 other formulas that had been declared as failures. October 24th, the third day of the quantitative injection. E107's physical signs did not change significantly. October 25th, the injection dose was increased to 50 milliliters. E107's performance after receiving the injection was no different from before. October 26th, the injection dose was increased to 100 milliliters. E107 went into shock after the injection. After resuscitation, he fell into a coma. October 27th, the test results showed that the concentration of VNO 9 in the experiment body's blood was increasing, and the color of his blood had also changed significantly. October 29th, E107 woke up from his coma. He was surprised and happy about the state of his body. According to his own statement, he felt that he had recovered his health. The physical examination results also showed that the diseased tissues in his body had mostly healed. October 31st, E107 received the 6th injection of VNO 9. The injection dose was 100 milliliters. There were no abnormal reactions after the injection. November 1st, E107 accidentally cut his finger. After seeing his own blood, he showed panic and anger. 3 minutes later, he used brute force to break free from the bed's bindings. He attacked 2 experiment personnel and the guards in an attempt to escape the facility. 12 minutes later, E107 was subdued. His left abdomen, right knee, and right shoulder were shot. November 2nd, E107's recovery speed was far beyond that of ordinary people. About 16 hours after the surgery, the 3 gunshot wounds on the experiment body had basically healed completely. November 3rd, the 7th injection. The injection dose was increased to 150 milliliters. E107 did not show any resistance. 14 minutes later, the experiment body's severed right foot suddenly ruptured. However, E107 did not show any signs of pain. November 5th, E107 grew a brand new right leg. November 6th, the 8th injection. The injection dose was increased to 250 milliliters. Due to E107's physical condition and his obvious attempt to escape, the injection site has been moved to Experiment Room 1. The injection will be carried out under the supervision of 6 armed guards. The record ended there. After Feng Bujue finished reading it, he walked to Human Head and showed the paper to him. He then asked, "You're E107? Human Head stared at the paper with an excited expression. After Brother Jew asked the question, he waited for 5 seconds before he blinked. "So, today is November 6th? Feng Bujue asked again. This time, Human Head kept his eyes open. He did not blink even after 10 seconds. "You can't be sure, right?" Brother Jew soon understood what the man meant, and he went with the flow to ask. Human Head blinked once, indicating that he was right. Feng Bujue thought about it and said, "Wait a moment. I suddenly have an idea." Before he finished, he turned around and started to clean up the items on the trolley next to him. 5 minutes later, in the corridor, Feng Bujue pushed the empty trolley with one hand and blocked his view with the other. He passed by the room where SCP-1011 was kept. After passing by the door of the room, Brother Jew did not have to worry about glancing at the statue again. He put down his hand and whistled. He was playing the classic whistling interlude of Twisted Nerve. The strange yet humorous melody was jarring in the empty corridor. When Brother Jew was whistling the third verse, he had returned to the original room, which was the door of Experiment Room 1. At this time, the metal door that he unlocked was completely open. It was obviously opened by the barefoot bro when he went in to search. After Feng Bujue entered the room, he did not turn on the lights. He pushed the trolley next to E107's body and used the rope that he prepared in advance and the straps on E107's clothes to firmly secure the headless body to the trolley. Then, Brother Jew adjusted his breathing, gripped the handle, and pushed the trolley down the corridor at an extremely fast speed. Chapter 1132. It only took Feng Bujue 2 minutes to return to the operating theater from Laboratory Room 1. During this time, he only slowed down slightly when he passed by the room with the statue. For the rest of the time, he ran as fast as he could. Even so, when he was halfway there, E107's body began to move. Fortunately, Brother Jew had already considered this and tied the body tightly. No matter how hard it struggled, it wouldn't fall off the trolley. Bang! At this point, Feng Bujue no longer cared about making a sound. He pushed the trolley through the door and rushed into the operating theater. As soon as he entered the operating theater, he pushed the trolley to the side of the bed. Then, he took the hanging curtain that he removed earlier and quickly covered it with the trolley. E107's body moved under the hanging curtain for about half a minute, and then it stopped moving. Phew! Feng Bujue let out a long sigh and said, "Not bad, the plan went well." He turned his face and looked at E107's head. To be honest, if your body struggled out of the trolley in the corridor, it would be troublesome. He spread his hands. "I don't have the confidence to drag your struggling body all the way back with my bare hand. If that happened, I'm afraid I'll have to find a way to break all the light bulbs in the corridor. When your body stops moving, I'll try again." E107 was a good listener. Because it couldn't speak, it could only look at Brother Jew. Feng Bujue didn't need it to say too much because he was very good at reading people's mind. "You must be wondering what I'm going to do with your body, right?" After E107 heard this, it blinked. "Haha. Actually, it's obvious, isn't it?" Feng Bujue continued with a smile. "I'm going to connect your head back to your body." The next second, E107 widened its eyes and looked at Brother Jew with a confused expression. From time to time, it would glance in the direction of its own body. "You want to ask, is this possible?" Brother Jew asked again. E107 blinked. "Humph." Feng Bujue smiled. "I don't know what the success rate is, but," he said in a relaxed tone, "is it really that important?" E107 did not respond. "It would be great if you could reattach your head, but what if you were to die in the process?" Feng Bujue continued. "So what?" He tilted his head. "It's better than keeping your current appearance, right?" Although Brother Jew made light of other people's lives, what he said did make sense. E107 also felt that it was better to die quickly than to live like this. Therefore, he quickly winked at Brother Jew. All right, looks like you've agreed. Then, let's not waste any more time. Feng Bujue did as he said. He turned around and moved E107's body. Brother Jew's physique was not bad, and he was quite strong in real life. It only took him 10 seconds to carry E107's body onto the bed. At this time, E107's right leg had been removed by Feng Bujue, and the bed was empty. After Brother Jew laid E107's body flat, he removed the man's head from the headboard and pulled out all the tubes that were connected to the head. At that moment, a painful expression appeared on E107's face, but the pain did not last long. In less than 2 seconds, Brother Jew had reattached his head back to his body. The moment the wound on his neck touched, E107 no longer felt any pain. Gh. Ugh. Then, E107 lay there steadily, and his throat kept making strange noises. Feng Bujue did not bother to shut him down. Instead, he silently calculated the time. This time, the body did not show any spontaneous convulsions, which means the nervous system has completed its self-repair, and the brain has taken over the command again. Thinking of this, he could not help but think to himself, in a sense, this drug called VNO9 should be considered a success. In the next few minutes, the wound on E107's neck healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. A few minutes ago, his head that had been separated from his body looked extremely haggard, but now, he had regained the appearance of a man in his 30s. Ugh, 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 ugh. 5 minutes later, accompanied by a series of coughs, E107 began to move. The first thing he did was to raise his hand and instinctively touch his neck. Then, he sat up with his elbows supporting his body. Thank you. This was the first sentence E107 said to Feng Bujue after he opened his mouth. You're welcome. Feng Bujue said, May I know your name? My name is Igor, Igor replied and then asked, And you? Feng Bujue. After all, the system would find a way to translate it, so Feng Bujue gave a direct answer. Nice to meet you, Feng Bujue. Igor continued. By the way, you're also an experiment, right? Brother Jew's acting came on the fly. I don't remember. He put on an amnesiac face. His eyes were deep and his expression was serious. When I woke up, I found myself abandoned together with your body in Lab 1 at the end of the corridor. I see. Igor revealed a sympathetic gaze. Then, how did you escape? With this, Feng Bujue took out the lock from his pocket and waved it before the man. I pried the door open. Oh? You're a locksmith? Igor asked. That's not important. Brother Jew did not plan to let the man keep asking questions, and Igor's questions were getting more and more off-topic. The important thing is, what happened here? Oh, you're right. Igor suddenly showed a panicked expression. Those demons. Demons. They suddenly appeared and killed all the researchers. He seemed to be reminded of something very scary. His whole body started to shake, and his voice involuntarily rose. Calm down, Igor. Take a deep breath. Feng Bujue was unfazed and said in a very calm tone, We're safe now. Don't panic. His extremely calm attitude and words had a calming power. What happened earlier, please tell me slowly and in detail. Ha? Igor quickly took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. Then, he looked into Brother Jew's eyes and said, It's the demons. It has to be. What demons? What did they look like? What did they do? Feng Bujue understood that in the face of such an incoherent guy, he had to point out the logic and organization of his answers. It's the kind that came in when you were hiding under the bed, Igor replied. They killed all the researchers. You saw it? Feng Bujue asked. Igor swallowed hard. I woke up from a coma and I found that my body was gone, and I couldn't scream even if I wanted to. At this point, he unconsciously reached out to touch his neck. They fixed my head to the bed frame, and it seemed that they wanted to dissect my feet first. Oh, yes, your feet. When Feng Bujua heard this, he casually reached out and took Igor's feet from a tray next to him. Try it. You should be able to put it back. Igor was still sitting on the hospital bed at this time. When he saw Brother Bujua handing over the foot, he took it somewhat woodenly, and then tried to put it back on the wound on his calf. Go on, they wanted to dissect you, and then? Feng Bujua immediately reminded him when he saw that Igor had stopped talking. Then. Igor froze for a moment, regained his train of thought and then recalled, there were gunshots and the screams of the guards outside. Then I saw. He seemed to recall a very terrifying scene, and his expression became more and more timid. They broke in. They? Feng Bujua repeated the word. More than one? Yes, there were 2 or 3 at that time, I didn't see clearly, Igor replied. Okay. Feng Bujua then asked, what happened after they broke in? The 3 researchers in the room were scared out of their wit. One of them wanted to run out, but the demon waved his hand and he was cut in half at the waist, Igor said. The other 2 were so scared that they sat on the ground and they were dragged out by the 2 demons. Wait a minute. Feng Bujua heard something strange. Since one of them was cut in half, then, what about the blood? That's the scariest part, Igor said. His face was pale, and he broke out in a cold sweat. He didn't bleed. Oh! Feng Bujua's expression changed. You mean, his body was cut in half at the waist, but there was no blood? Yes, Igor replied with certainty. After his upper and lower body was separated by the demon, the wound was covered by a black substance, and no blood or internal organs came out. And he could still move. Oh! Feng Bujua nodded and asked, what happened after that? After that, the demons dragged all the researchers out, whether they were whole or cut in half. Igor replied. After that, about an hour later, you came in that case they might not be dead. Feng Bujua said. No, people who are taken away by the demons will be dragged into the abyss of hell. Igor said seriously. They must have. There's one more question. Feng Bujua did not intend to listen to Igor's talk about feudal superstitions. He interrupted, why weren't you taken away? This question made Igor's expression change, and he fell into silence. After a while, he looked at his right foot that was gradually regaining feeling and muttered, maybe. I'm already a demon, ha. Feng Bujua laughed. No, you're not a demon. How do you know? Igor asked in return, and he said with some excitement, you saw it too. My head was chopped off before, but I'm still alive and well now. That kind of thing has nothing to do with whether you're a demon or not. Feng Bujua continued in a calm tone. You're alive because... As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed to the container with the green liquid next to him. Your body has mutated under the influence of VNO-9. So, what the hell is that? Igor held his forehead and showed a pained expression. They told me at the beginning that I was here to receive medical assistance. Because I was injured in the war, seriously ill, and had no family, so I got this precious opportunity. He paused for half a second, and his hand hanging by his side suddenly clenched. But after I came, they injected me with that damn poison. They turned me into a monster. After saying that, he used his clenched fist to heavily knock on the low cabinet beside the bed. Unexpectedly, this punch actually made a hole in the top of the cabinet. That's not poison. Feng Bujua glanced at the low cabinet and said, it's some kind of drug in the experimental stage. How do you know? Igor heard this, and there was a flash of suspicion in his eyes. Oh, don't worry, I'm not one of them. Feng Bujua knew what Igor was suspicious of. He smiled calmly and said, I just made some inferences based on the experimental log and my personal observations. He paused for 2 seconds and said, I think the original design of this VNO drug should be used to improve the combat effectiveness of soldiers. But there must be many problems or defects in the formula used, so the formula number 1 to number 8 all failed. At this point, Brother Jew raised his eyebrows and looked at Igor. But this VNO9, at least on you, the experiment was a success. Successfully turned me into a monster? Igor asked. No, not a monster, but a super soldier. Feng Bujue continued. Throw away your common sense and religious prejudice, and think about it again. When he said this, his tone was very bewitching. Now you have super strength, speed, endurance, and amazing self-healing ability. Even if you step on a landmine or get hit by a shell on the battlefield, as long as your head is not damaged, there is a great chance that you can recover on your own. He glanced at the container of VNO9 again. And all of this is thanks to this drug. After Brother Jew said this, Igor fell into silence again. After a while, he spoke again and snorted coldly. So I have to thank them? That's not necessary. Feng Bujue said, you didn't take the initiative to participate in this kind of experiment. You were just used by them as a guinea pig. If you want to thank someone, you should thank yourself. While your body gained this power, it also took the corresponding risk. To put it bluntly, any mistake in the experiment could lead to your death. You survived until now and became a super soldier by relying on your body's adaptability and a little luck. Chapter 1133. Igor could not immediately accept Feng Bujue's theory, but he understood part of it. After thinking for a moment, Igor said, well, let's assume that I've really become what you said. A super soldier, but this still doesn't explain why those demons didn't take me away. Oh, so you don't know the reason? Feng Bujue muttered. Of course I don't know, Igor immediately replied. Well. Feng Bujue thought for a few seconds and said, so, according to your observation, those demons, did they do anything unusual to you? He paused for half a second and added, I mean, when you only had one head. This. Igor thought for a moment. Now that you mention it. He did notice something. They seemed to be unable to see me. Unable to see you? Feng Bujue repeated this key word in an inquiring tone. Yes. Igor nodded. That means, when they looked at me, the focus of their eyes was never on me. It was as if I was the same as the bed frame behind me, all in the background. Oh. Hearing this, Feng Bujue immediately came up with a theory. Do you think this has something to do with blood? Blood? Igor showed a puzzled expression. You said earlier that the researcher who was torn in two by them did not bleed a drop of blood under a strange effect. Feng Bujue continued, so I'm thinking that the ability of those demons may have some connection with human blood. You mean? Igor was not stupid. He responded belatedly, because there is no normal blood in my body, so in their eyes. Feng Bujue continued, you're like an invisible shadow. Igor thought for a moment and laughed dryly. Ha, ha ha, if that's the case, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. As Feng Bujue spoke, he picked up the syringe and a few empty blood bags used to draw blood and walked to the container of VNO9 liquid beside the bed. Igor seemed to have guessed what the other party was going to do. Mr. Feng, don't tell me you want to inject yourself with that too? No, I don't plan on doing that. Unexpectedly, Brother Jew gave a negative answer. There is only one experiment log here, which means you are the only known experimental subject. Without any other data to support it, I can't be sure if the drug will have the same effect on me as it did on you. His tone was objective and cold, as if he was describing something that had nothing to do with him. Your body can adapt to this medicine, but it doesn't mean that I can too. Besides, even if you're a successful example, you've experienced several near-death situations during the experiment. Therefore, unless it is absolutely necessary, I am not prepared to take this risk. Igor only understood half of what was going on. However, He could tell that his brother Jew was not going to inject the drug, so he asked, "Then, are you going to?" "I just want to bring some with me in case of an emergency," Feng Bujue replied. "In case I'm forced into a corner, I don't mind giving myself a shot of 300 milliliters. This will burst the blood vessels." Even if Igor had no medical knowledge, he knew that injecting such a large amount of liquid had to be done slowly or in batches. "You don't have to worry about that." Feng Bujue's calm attitude made him look like a desperado. "I have my ways." Looking at his nonchalant look, Igor did not know what to say. He simply changed the topic and asked, "By the way, what were you writing in the past few hours?" "Novels," Feng Bujue replied without hesitation as he busied himself with the task at hand. "Ah." Igor's first reaction was, "Did I hear wrongly? I'm a novelist." Feng Bujue knew that Igor did not understand, so he explained. "Even if you're a novelist and suddenly have a burst of inspiration, you don't have to rush your manuscript in a place like this, right?" Igor continued to ask. "I'm not writing because I want to." Feng Bujue smiled helplessly. "I'm just influenced by something." Then, Brother Jew explained the existence and principle of SCP-1011 to Igor, and tried to explain it in detail in a way that Igor could understand. Igor did not quite believe this at first, but he thought about it. He had already lost his head today, and he had also seen the devil. What else was there to not believe? So, he generally accepted that setting. More than 10 minutes later, Feng Bujue and Igor were both ready. The two brought all kinds of things they needed and armed themselves. Then, they walked out of the operating room together. Brother Jew knew that Igor, an NPC, was a very powerful helper, and the difficulty of getting this helper was quite high. Feng Bujue did not seem to encounter any particularly big obstacles along the way, as if he had completed the script easily and logically, but in fact, if it were someone else playing this game, they might have died more than 10 times. Even if all the settings that could scare people to disconnect were ignored, there were at least 5 visible death flags. First of all, Laboratory Number 1. If the player was delayed for more than 20 minutes in this room for any reason, Barefoot would break in, and the result was undoubtedly death. If the player attacked the mirror in the room, the person in the room behind the mirror would try to lure Barefoot into the room in advance, and then the player would die. Then, after the player left Lab Number 1, if they stopped in front of the statue room and tried to open the door for more than 5 minutes, then Barefoot Bro would kill his way out from the other end of the corridor before the player could enter the operating theater. At this time, if the player did not react in time, then they would die again. In that situation, there was only one effective reaction. That was to escape back to Laboratory Room No. 1, close the door again, and run to the corner furthest away from the door with the lights off. Then, she would squat down and cover Igor's body with her body. Only by strictly carrying out the above actions would the result of not seeing the player after Barefoot entered the room would be triggered. Otherwise, death is just one word, and I have said it for the 4th time. Then, there would be a super obvious instant death event in the operating room. Those who did not hide under the bed in time would die. Other than that, if the player ran in the direction where Barefoot appeared when he walked toward Laboratory Number 1, it would trigger the death flag. One last thing. Just as Feng Bujue predicted, if the player purposely triggered SCP-1011 again after knowing its characteristics, they would be judged by the system as AFKing. Then, not only would they die, they would suffer various punishments and be kicked out of the scenario. In conclusion, Feng Bujue might have looked relaxed, but in reality, he had been walking on a single plank bridge. However, he never took a wrong step, so from the perspective of others, he did not appear to be in much danger. As for Igor, this helper, he should be considered a hidden reward. Normally, the player would either ignore the head or give him a quick death and continue the exploration. After all, there were not many people like Feng Bujue who would move a body and try to connect the mission, and the reward for success was obvious to all. After Igor's body was reconstructed, Brother Ju obtained a summoned creature that was like an invisible barrier before the monsters. Furthermore, it was the kind that could last for an unlimited amount of time and had a self-healing ability. It was perfect to have him do the scouting work. Even if he stepped on something like a landmine, there was a high chance that he would survive. After walking out of the operating room, Feng Bujue said to Igor, "Then, according to what we discussed earlier, you will be the scout." "Oh, okay." Even though Igor knew that it was more appropriate for him to be the scout, he was not a fearless person like Brother Ju. In this kind of environment, he would more or less be afraid. "Don't be nervous. Remember, you are very strong now." Feng Bujue knew very well that even though Igor's body had mutated, his heart was still that of a normal person, and he needed more encouragement. "Biologically, you are almost immortal. When you meet the demons, they won't be able to see you anyway. If there are any unexpected situations, I will be behind you. In any case, you can rest assured." Igor nodded in response. Then, he took a step forward and led the way. In fact, Feng Bujue had already told Igor many similar things when he was packing up the equipment. If not for Brother Ju's patient persuasion, Igor would not have dared to walk out of the operating room. After this period of interaction, Brother Ju had also noticed that the fear of supernatural things was this NPC's biggest weakness. In the upcoming scenario, he had to take this factor into consideration, or else he might be tricked. Of course, from a tactical point of view, Igor was already a killing machine, so it was normal for him to have some flaws. If the system set Igor's personality to be a fearless materialist, a determined warrior whose duty is to liberate all mankind, then the following scenario would become: Captain Soviet will take you on a tour of the Nightmare Instance dungeon. Clang. What's that sound? 10 seconds later, Igor had just led Brother Ju for about 20 meters when a strange noise came from the corner ahead. It scared him so much that he stopped immediately. "It sounds like," Feng Bujue said calmly, "the sound of some kind of gate?" He was just guessing, but he was right. 10 seconds later, the two came to the corner. They poked their heads out and saw that the corridor in front of them had been sealed by a metal gate from the top and bottom. "This is a dead end?" Igor turned his head and asked Brother Ju. "So that's how it is." Feng Bujue mumbled to himself as he turned to leave. "Eh? What do you mean by that? What do you know?" Igor hurriedly followed him back. At this moment, Brother Ju understood two things. First, when Barefoot was walking toward laboratory room number 1, if he had chosen to escape in this direction, then the sound of the iron gate closing would have led Barefoot back. At that time, the player whose path was sealed would have been blocked by Barefoot in the corridor. As for the second thing, there should be a pressure sensor here, Feng Bujue said as he returned to the place where he heard the clang sound and looked down at the ground. "What device?" Igor was obviously a person with limited literacy, so he did not understand some of the words. "To put it simply, it's the kind of mechanism that will be triggered after you step on it," Feng Bujue said as he tried to find the pressure sensor point. "Oh," Igor responded, then lowered his head and helped Brother Ju step on the ground. However, the two of them busied themselves for a long time, but it was still in vain. Feng Bujue stopped and thought about it again. It's not the kind of mechanism that can be activated by stepping on it again. At this time, he thought of Barefoot again. "Speaking of which, when the monster came and went, I didn't hear the sound of the gate closing. The difference between us and him is," thinking about that, an idea flashed through Brother Ju's mind. "Oh, okay." After thinking of the answer, he laughed and walked 3 or 4 meters in the direction of the operating room. Then, he said to Igor, "Igor, come here for a moment." Igor was stunned for a moment and walked toward Brother Ju. "What?" You found the location of the mechanism? Yes, I found it. Before Feng Bujue finished speaking, he heard a clang sound. A slower, continuous sound came from the corner. It's true. When Igor heard it, he was ready to turn around, but clang! Just as he turned around and took 2 steps, he heard the sound of the gate closing again. D***, is there more than one switch? Igor looked down at the soles of his feet. No, there's only one. Feng Bujue shook his head. From where you are now, the whole corridor in front of you is a complete pressure-sensitive zone. Huh. Igor used a modal particle to show that he did not understand. Come back to my position first, Feng Bujue said. Igor shrugged and walked back. When he walked to Brother Ju's side, the sound of the gate slowly opening was heard again. Let's put it this way. Feng Bujue raised his finger and pointed to the front. He turned to Igor and said, when an object of a certain weight presses on any part of the corridor in front, the gate will close. Chapter 1134. Then, Igor looked puzzled. How did the demon from before? The water content of an adult's body accounts for about 65% of the total body weight. Feng Bujue knew what Igor wanted to ask, so he replied directly. The demon looked like a mummy at first glance. It must be quite light, so it wouldn't trigger the mechanism. As Brother Ju said this, he put down the toolbox in his hand and began to take things out of his pocket. Igor looked at Brother Ju's actions and asked, you want to reduce your weight and go through? Yes. Feng Bujue replied, I'm Asian. My skeleton is smaller than yours, and I'm also on the skinny side. After I remove all the weight, I may succeed. Wait. Igor was a little flustered. Are you going to leave me alone? Of course not. Feng Bujue replied, according to my speculation, there should be a switch to turn off the pressure sensor on the opposite side of the gate. He paused. I'll go over now, find the switch and turn it off. Then, you can go through this section at will. Oh. Igor nodded. Well, that's about it. I won't take off my clothes, because he can't take them off even if he wants to. When Feng Bujue said this, he had already taken out all the things he could take with him. If I fail, then you'll have to try. If even you fail, then I. Igor was just about to ask himself how he was going to try, but the answer had already appeared in his mind. You want me to saw off part of my body? Feng Bujue did not answer. He smiled at him and then walked forward. 1 step, 2 steps. He soon walked into the pressure-sensitive area and then, clang. It's not that easy. Brother Ju muttered and retreated. That's true. If I could pass through without carrying any weight, then when the barefooted guy went to search the first laboratory, I could have sneaked out from here quietly. This doesn't make sense. But, in this place there must be a way for a player to clear it alone. It's impossible for the system to set up a puzzle that requires Igor's help to clear it. Because the resurrection of Igor is an event with variables, the outcome of this event and the progress of the main plot will form a certain necessary connection, which will lead to a certain probability of a hard block. He was right. As mentioned earlier, the resurrection of Igor could not be considered as one of the main storyline tasks. If the player chose to end the head's pain, or caused Igor's distrust during the communication, or even triggered a fight, then it would be impossible to use the power of this NPC to pass through the gate. Of course, based on the current situation, Feng Bujue had already fulfilled the trigger condition to have Igor open the gate. But everyone knew about Brother Ju's temper. Even if it was not necessary, he would have to solve the puzzle alone before he would feel better. Ha! Hearing the clang and seeing Brother Ju walk back, Igor could not help but laugh drily. Looks like I can get ready now. He turned his head to look at his shoulder. Sawing off my arm should be about time. No, there's no need to rush. Feng Bujue waved his hand and said thoughtfully, let me think about it. Igor listened but did not say anything. He silently waited for his brother Jew to make the decision. Even though they had not known each other for long, Igor had developed a strong sense of trust toward this man called Fong Bujua before him, because the man seemed to know everything, and he was always calm and collected like a mountain was falling before him. I see. Fong Bujua did not need to think for too long before he came up with an idea. He walked to the toolbox and squatted down. He quickly took out several empty blood bags and the needles that came with them. What are you? Igor looked at Brother Jew with a questioning gaze. Since the density of the fluid in the body is high, Fong Bujua said as he wrapped the rubber band around his arm. Then I will draw out about 2,000 milliliters of blood before I try. Hey! Igor was shocked when he heard that. That's going to kill someone. You have a point. 2,000 milliliters is a bit dangerous. When Brother Jew said that, he had already inserted the needle into his blood vessel like nothing had happened and removed the rubber band around his bicep. The next second, his blood flowed slowly through the tube into the blood bag. I'll start with 1,500. Igor was speechless. Brother Fong, I appreciate your kindness, but I think you should let me chop off my arm. Chopping off an arm is not enough. Fong Bujue did not stop drawing blood. Instead, he said calmly, you are already one size bigger than I am. The weight of one arm will only allow you to be as heavy as me. He raised his head to glance down the corridor. To pass through there, you will have to chop off at least one arm and one leg. Hearing that, Igor instinctively lowered his head to look at his two legs like he was trying to figure out which one would be less painful. In addition, when you jump across the corridor with one leg, I have to find something to cover your sawed-off hands and feet so that your severed limbs won't move under the light. Fong Bujue continued, compared to that, it's more convenient to draw my blood. Anyway, I can immediately transfuse my blood back. It's not a big problem. While the two were talking, Fong Bujue did not stop drawing blood. Within a few minutes, he had drawn more than 1,500 milliliters of blood, which filled nearly 4 blood collection bags. At this time, he pulled out the needle and pressed the tourniquet against the wound. Phew! After drawing the blood, Brother Jew obviously felt dizzy and his vision blurred. So, he took a few deep breaths. Brother Fong, are you okay? Igor asked worriedly. I'm fine. After Fong Bujue said this, he lay on the ground. Hey! You're lying on the ground and you're saying you're fine. Igor was shocked again. No, I just think that increasing the contact area with the ground can reduce the pressure. As Fong Bujue spoke, he began to crawl forward. Although I don't know if it'll work, I'll give it a try. A few seconds later, Brother Jew crawled into the sensor area. In the end, the sound of the gate closing did not come. Very good. Fong Bujue muttered, as long as you can pass. His face was very pale and his voice sounded weak. I'll go first. He looked like he was crawling with difficulty. The worst-case scenario is that I'll pass out before I can press the switch. However, he still smiled. If that really happens, you can cut off your own body, close the gate, and transfuse your blood to me. At this point, Fong Bujue actually made a mistake. In fact, crawling forward was useless because the thing in front of him was a gravity sensor with a large range. Reducing local pressure was not very meaningful. Instead of crawling forward, it was better to lean against the wall. An experiment with an electronic scale showed that while remaining still, leaning against the wall or exerting downward force on the wall with both hands could reduce the number on the scale. In any case, Fong Bujue successfully avoided the trigger line of this pressure device, because the amount of blood he drew had greatly exceeded the system's estimation. The density of blood was only a little higher than that of water. There was not much difference between the two. After drawing more than 1,500 milliliters of blood, Fong Bujue lost about 3 or 4 kilograms of weight, and this 3 or 4 kilograms happened to be the limit set by the system. There was no doubt that the weight requirement of this place was set by the system according to the player's weight. Taking into account the premise that the player could not take off their clothes and excluded all other weights, the theoretical limit of passing through was to draw 500 milliliters of blood, an amount that would not cause obvious discomfort for a normal adult. Wrap some tape on the hands and use both hands to lean against the wall to reduce the weight, and then walk sideways all the way. Although Feng Bujue did not use the friction force against the wall to reduce his weight, he completely ignored his own safety when drawing blood, allowing him to smoothly pass through the corridor. Phew! Feng Bujue took a deep breath and used his perverted willpower to support his consciousness and body, and struggled to crawl forward. He crawled more than 20 meters for 3 minutes. This time was not short, but considering that he had just drawn nearly 1/3 of the blood in his body, it was not easy. Is it that? After passing through the gate, Feng Bujue found a handbrake switch on the wall nearby. He propped himself up and pulled the switch. Then he raised his voice and shouted to Igor at the other end of the corner, "Igor, try stepping on the sensor area." "Okay." Igor responded and did as he was told. This time, the gate did not close because of Igor's weight, which meant that Brother Jew pulled the switch correctly. So, Igor hurriedly packed up everything on the ground, passed through the corridor, and ran to Brother Jew's side. "Brother Feng, don't panic, I'll give you a blood transfusion." Igor quickly took out the few bags of blood that Brother Jew had drawn and prepared to give him a transfusion. But when he was about to do it, he realized that he did not know how to do it. "Haha, let me do it." Brother Jew laughed. "Please help me to sit by the wall." 10 minutes later, Feng Bujue had connected the drainage tube and the blood bag, and fixed the needle in his vein. More than half of the first bag of blood that he had drawn had been transfused back. "Brother Feng, are you feeling better?" Igor was standing against the wall, holding the blood bag above Brother Jew's head. "No." Feng Bujue's answer was straightforward. "Even if I transfuse all of this back, the physical discomfort will not disappear immediately." "Oh." The corners of Igor's mouth twitched twice. "By the way, will it be harmful to your body if you keep doing this?" "It's okay." Feng Bujue replied. "This is a simple self-transfusion without washing. As long as the blood drawn within 6 hours is not contaminated, it will be directly transfused back. There are almost no side effects." As he spoke, he raised his head and glanced at the blood bag. "Besides, I'm using a special blood collection bag, and it comes with an anticoagulant. If there are any side effects, at most, it will cause a slight thrombosis or hemolysis." Igor did not understand most of what Brother Jew said. He just looked at him with admiration and said, "Brother Feng, you novelists really know a lot. That's amazing." "Haha, you've misunderstood." Feng Bujue smiled. "Among those of us who hold the pen, there are scammers who are ignorant and incompetent, actors who provide entertainment for others, idiots who are narcissistic, and traitors who are cunning and evil, but there are not many real intellectuals among us." He continued in a self-deprecating tone, "Those who are really knowledgeable study more substantial things. Their research results will promote the advancement of science and technology and bring tangible benefits to mankind." He tilted his head. "As for people like us, except for a few sages and pillars of the world in the past few thousand years, most of us would be lucky if we don't cause trouble for the world. If you worship us, you might as well worship the religious leaders." At this point, Brother Jew paused for a few seconds before adding, "By the way, the reason I know about blood transfusion is because I have a friend who is a doctor. I once purposely asked him about this." Okay. Igor was stunned by Feng Bujue's words. He did not know that Brother Jew was in a bad mood and liked to bicker, so he did not know how to respond. The two chatted for more than 20 minutes. Feng Bujue quickly transfused 2 blood bags. After the 3rd bag, Brother Jew stood up. "Okay. I feel much better." Let's transfuse the remaining 2 bags as we walk. His complexion was indeed much better. Compared to when the blood was first drawn, at least there was some color in his complexion. Ah. Then Igor said, continue to lead the way? Yes, sorry to trouble you. Fong Bujue said as he took the blood bag from Igor. I'll take this myself. You also have to carry the toolbox. Okay, no problem, Igor said. Igor said, I feel like I have an endless supply of energy now. Carrying a toolbox is a breeze. That's good. Fong Bujue nodded and did not say much. In fact, Brother Ju had already seen that this VNO-9 experimental subject was extremely strong. Take what happened just now as an example. Perhaps even Igor himself did not notice that when he helped Brother Ju hold the blood bag, he did not change his arm. His arm was held there steadily, like a stent, and it did not tremble for dozens of minutes. If it were an ordinary person, their arm would have been sore and they would have to change their posture even if they did not change their arm. However, Igor did not even feel anything. Chapter 1135. The area outside the gate was quite similar to the previous section of the road. The gray walls and floor gave off a lifeless feeling. The chandelier above was also arranged at the same distance, emitting a cold white light. Fong Bujue and Igor walked for dozens of meters before they saw a room. The door of the room was also made of metal, and it was now open. Igor poked his head in to take a look, but he didn't find any signs of living creatures. So, under Brother Ju's instruction, he walked into the room and turned on the light switch. After turning on the light, the scene in the room was clearly displayed in front of the 2 of them. It was a space of about 40 square meters. There were a lot of strange equipment stored in it, and most of them were torture instruments. The room was filled with a strange, unpleasant smell. According to Fong Bujue's speculation, the smell was a mixture of chemicals, blood, and excrement. The various stains left on the floor and the torture instruments were enough to support his speculation. According to Brother Ju's style, it was natural for him to search the place. After searching, he did find a few valuable tools. After all, this was a torture room. There must be a lot of things in the room that could be used to hurt people. The weapons found here were naturally more useful than those found in the surgery room. A few minutes later, when the 2 of them left the room, Igor had a sharp meat cleaver in his hand. At this moment, the burly captain of the Soviet Union, when he first entered the base, he was very thin and weak, but during the course of the experiment, his body gradually changed, was wearing a torn restraining gown. The straps and the cuffs of the gown had been cut open with scissors in the operating room. He was barefooted and holding a weapon in his hand. He was a living demon. With Brother Ju as his spiritual support, Igor's fear was alleviated a lot. And as time went by, he gradually experienced the strength of his body. His strength, reflexes, and stamina had obviously improved. Just now, when he was looking into the room where the lights were not turned on, he realized that his eyes could see very well even in the dark. This kind of night vision ability was obviously superior to that of an ordinary person. Even though we found a few usable weapons, there are no plot items. The 2 of them continued to move forward. Fong Bujue's mind did not stop. After coming out from lab number 1, we've been turning in the same direction repeatedly, and we're getting further and further away from the room behind the mirror. At this point, he could not help but think, it feels like the plot of this scenario will be very long. His feeling was not wrong. The space of this scenario was huge, and there were many plots that could be explored. The plot until the players came out from the gate was just the beginning. About 4 hours ago, inside the observation room. This was a room that was only a mirror away from laboratory number 1. The interior decoration of the house was mainly white. Whether it was the console, the chairs, or the computer mainframe, they were all streamlined. It could be said that it was very futuristic. Attention all units, the new item will appear at the predetermined spawn point. The second Feng Bujue was transported to Lab Number 1. One of the workers who sat behind the mirror screen quickly pressed the communication button on the control panel and sent out a notification. In less than 5 seconds, a woman's voice came through the communicator. Observer, this is Dr. Cox. Please share the data to Analysis Room number 3, 4, and 19. I'm done, Doctor. When the observer heard the other party's description, he had already completed the operation. Very good. Several seconds later, Dr. Cox said, Okay. I've taken over the data on your side. You can stop working now. Phew. Hearing that, the operator sighed in relief. He stood up and stretched lazily. Then, I'll go make myself a cup of coffee and prepare to watch a good show. At the same time, inside an office on the other side of the base, an intellectual beauty wearing a white lab coat was busying herself in front of a virtual projection console. Dr. Cox had a pair of beautiful brown eyes and black hair. Although she was almost 40 years old, in her era, the symptoms of aging were not obvious before the age of 60. Therefore, she looked like a young woman in her early 20s. Let me see. What kind of setting will it be this time? Dr. Cox muttered as she pulled up the relevant experimental data. Current mirror number. Earth 202 time. October 1949 location. Former Soviet Union Psychotronics Organization Underground Laboratory. Basic background. In a sleep deprivation experiment, 5 experimental subjects persisted in a closed environment until the 24th day. A supernatural mutation occurred. Then, all of the experimental subjects escaped from the experimental area, causing a large number of casualties and causing the base to be paralyzed. A very typical plot. Dr. Cox only took a few seconds to read the content. Then, she raised her right hand and casually swiped in the air beside her. She summoned a virtual interface. Application for Information Display, SCP-3232. Password, Walnut. After Dr. Cox said a few words to the interface, a cold artificial voice immediately responded, Frowny face, the application has been submitted. Verifying the password correct, voice print recognition complete. Welcome to view the data, Dr. Cox. After a few short voice prompts, a floating virtual window popped up. A detailed document was listed in the window. Project number, SCP-3232 Project Grade, Euclid Special Containment Measures. Due to SCP-3232's special properties, it is currently impossible to set up a containment procedure for it. Description: SCP-3232 is a story-type phenomenon that appears irregularly. There are no clear signs or rules for its occurrence and termination, and its process seems to be completely random. The higher-ups of the Foundation are still debating whether this project is real or not. Although this project has not shown any direct hostility to existing human civilization or the four-dimensional space, some of the management still stubbornly believe that this project should be upgraded to Kita grade. The relevant application will be indefinitely shelved until the end of the observation program. Based on the current observation records, SCP-3232 has the following characteristics. Frowny face first, SCP-3232 has a high probability of appearing in horror or thrillers, accounting for more than 1% of data mask. It often involves other SCP projects, containment or non-containment. Second, when SCP-3232 appears, it will inevitably teleport 1 to 6 humanoid creatures, namely SCP-3232-1, to the location of the incident. The teleportation method is different, and the mechanism is unknown. Third, all SCP-3232-1 observed so far are young humans above the age of 16. The male-to-female ratio is 6:4, and more than 90% of them are of Asian descent. SCP-3232-1 is generally handsome, especially the females. Their clothing ranges widely. The observed examples include but are not limited to special forces uniforms, suits, bathrobes, medieval armor, ancient Chinese armor, and many other styles of casual clothing from the late 20th to early 21st century. There are also many fictional characters' outfits from novels, comics, and movies. Fourth, some SCP-3232-1 have special abilities, such as super physical strength, the ability to release physical energy, teleportation, or data masked, and so on. There are many types of these abilities, and each individual's performance is different. So far, the most common ability is the ability to retrieve items from a subspace that we cannot observe. Fifth, SCP-3232 will communicate with SCP-3232-1 in a form that we cannot understand and will give them missions. The missions can be in multiple forms, and they can also conflict with each other. When SCP-3232-1 receives a conflicting mission, they will attack each other and spare no effort to kill each other. Sixth, most SCP-3232-1 will show contempt or even disregard for their own lives when they are in a situation where they are certain to die, or in order to help their companions complete their mission. Seventh, when SCP-3232 occurs, it will affect all things related to it on a mental level. Those affected by this effect will usually ignore SCP-3232-1's strange name and appearance, and will be able to understand the various languages they speak, even if some of the words they speak are words that the affected person has never heard of before. Only when SCP-3232 disappears will the affected person realize the abnormality from before. Eighth, there is a high probability that SCP-3232-1 will die or suddenly disappear during SCP-3232's existence. The latter situation will most likely occur when SCP-3232-1 is frightened, after being frightened, or when they are in a desperate situation. Once all SCP-3232-1 dies or disappears, SCP-3232 will immediately cease to exist. Ninth, when all SCP-3232-1 have the same mission objective, the completion of a certain mission will cause SCP-3232 to cease to exist, and all SCP-3232-1 will disappear. When SCP-3232-1 has conflicting mission objectives, one or both of them must become the final survivor to trigger this effect. 10th, SCP-3232-1's corpse will disappear within a few seconds of its death. Attempts to collect its DNA will also end in failure. Appendix: Observation Plan. Even if we are unable to contain SCP-3232 for the time being, with the Foundation's current technological capabilities, we can induce SCP-3232 to appear by creating an environment suitable for SCP-3232 to appear. We can observe the entire process and even intervene to a certain extent. This will help us understand the various characteristics of this project in more detail. Perhaps one day we will be able to control and use it. Note: all members of the Overseer Council, please read Document 3232-05. Document 3232-05. Alright, let me get straight to the point. We are faced with something that is projected from a world that is parallel to or higher than our own. For them, this might be some kind of entertainment or it might be some kind of simulation test. But for us, this is not fun at all. Because SCP-3232 has the possibility of attracting all kinds of Keter-level projects from other universes. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then read Document 3232-L. That way, you'll know that the people who came up with the observation plan are playing with fire. Document 3232-L. Agent Stevens' voice recording. Time: data blocked, a location. Data blocked, I feel like we've been set up. This guy is definitely not a normal D-grade personnel. His name is most likely not Rudy Austin. I don't know how he passed the inspection, but I know that this guy is very powerful, so powerful that it makes one's hair stand on end. When the power went out, he was standing in SCP-173's room, but he managed to escape. He knew how to use 294 to subdue 173, and he even went to 738 to do something. Our security team didn't know about 106, but he seemed to know everything about it. In addition, he also knew how to use 1998, and he acted as if nothing had happened when he was affected by 513. Even though he was arrested after being affected by 055, the result was, he subdued Officer Cosmo during the interrogation and found an opportunity to enter the emergency exit. He and Billy, and Anomalous, 01 obviously know each other. I think he used 914 to enhance the puppet's spatial ability, and that's how he managed to escape the base. Note: for other records of the project's activities, as well as examples suspected to be caused by this project, please refer to the observation plan. As the main advocate and executor of the observation plan, it was naturally not the first time Dr. Cox had read this document. Among the known and confirmed incidents of SCP-3232 activity, the one recorded in Document 3232L was the one that caused the greatest damage to the Foundation. Furthermore, the Foundation had not confirmed the existence of SCP-3232 at that time, or rather, they had not even realized the existence of SCP-3232. But things were different now. This was the future 200 years after Feng Bujue's ultimate rescue. The Foundation of this era had the technological level to operate the mirror dimension, mainly because they had a breakthrough in their research on SCP-1733. They could simulate or rather recreate the events that happened in a parallel universe in a specific environment. For example, the scenario that Feng Bujue was in was actually a micro-universe simulated by the Foundation inside a large facility. In a way, this was similar to the scenario world generated by Thriller Paradise, but the scale was much smaller. Click. 1 minute later, the light in Lab Number 1 came on. At that moment, Cox looked at Brother Jew on the monitor, and Brother Jew was looking at the one-way mirror in Lab Number 1. The two looked at each other in a strange way. Ha! The professor looked at this experimental subject and whispered to himself, "Good luck, sir. Show me what you've got." Chapter 1136. Not long after they left the interrogation room, Feng Bujue came across a fork in the road. It was a crossroad. There was no sign and there was no visible hint. Be it left, right, or front, all they saw was the same corridor. If this was a normal difficulty scenario, Feng Bujue would have tried to persuade Igor to split up with him to increase the search radius and efficiency. However, this was a nightmare scenario, and Brother Jew had seen the strength of the monsters in this scenario. In all fairness, with his current physical condition, he might not be able to survive even if he was under Igor's protection, let alone acting alone. Furthermore, with Igor's extreme fear of the supernatural, he might not agree to split up with Brother Jew. Therefore, Feng Bujue pointed ahead and signaled for Igor to continue leading the way. Just like that, the two walked for a while, and along the way they passed 4 rooms. The metal doors of these 4 rooms were all closed, and there was no sign on the door. Even though Brother Jew could have stopped picking the lock at any time, he did not do so. Based on his previous experience in the statue room, he believed that he should see something related to the main storyline before he made the decision. This is strange. After the 4 rooms were behind them, Feng Bujue could not help but wonder, just how big is this scenario? After walking such a long distance, there are no clues, puzzles, or monsters. So far, all the corridors and rooms are unmarked. Could it be that everyone who works in this underground lab has the map of the entire base imprinted in their mind? Indeed, this didn't seem normal, although no signs could play a role in confusing the enemy when there was an invasion. It was a bit ridiculous to make the scenery of the corridor so similar. Other than Feng Bujue, who could draw the map in his mind and identify the different locations based on the texture on the walls, for most normal people, this place was a maze. Basically, if you walked to a crossroad, closed your eyes, and turned around several times before opening them again, you would not be able to tell where you came from. With such a layout, not only would the intruders be troubled, even the daily work of the people inside would be affected. This was undoubtedly illogical. Brother Feng, you should change your blood packs. Igor's reminder pulled Feng Bujue back from his thoughts. Feng Bujue looked up. Indeed, the third bag of blood was almost finished. Thus, the two of them stopped in their tracks and prepared to exchange for the fourth and final pack of blood. Igor, there's something I want to ask you, Feng Bujue said as he prepared to insert the needle. What's the matter? Igor asked. When you were sent into this base, was it like this? Feng Bujue asked. Also, do you remember the route that led out of this base? Or do you know where I can find a map or something? Igor shook his head. I don't know. I was carried in with my head covered. He said thoughtfully, my last memory of the outside world was being carried into a car by several warriors, soldiers. As soon as I got into the car, my head was covered. When the hood was taken off, I was already lying in this base. The answer was not that surprising. Feng Bujue was just asking with the intention of giving it a try. Understood. When Brother Ju answered, he had finished swapping the blood bags. All right, let's keep moving. He raised his eyes to look down the corridor. After all, if we keep moving forward, even if we can't find the exit, we'll eventually find the end. Before he could finish his sentence, the scene that appeared in front of him made him swallow the last word back down his throat. At this moment, Feng Bujue saw a humanoid creature that looked like a mummy, walking towards them from dozens of meters away. Ha 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 ha! The monster also saw Brother Ju at the first moment and gave a strange, dry laugh. When the laughter came, Igor turned his head and was immediately shocked. Ah! Demon! Demon! He was so scared that he stuttered and could not even speak a complete sentence. Don't panic, it can't see you. Feng Bujue was calm as usual. He quickly said to Igor, anyway, it must be coming for me. When it gets closer, try to chop off its head. In fact, Brother Ju did not know if the decapitation method would work. However, based on his years of fighting with various demons and ghosts, the success rate of this method was relatively high. Thud, 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 thud. The monster first took a few steps, then gradually sped up and started running at full speed. From the sound of its footsteps, it was obvious that it was wearing shoes. Looking at its upper body, there were still some remnants of torn clothes. Therefore, it was definitely not the barefoot bro that Brother Ju and the rest had encountered before. However, the two looked to be the same species. Ha 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 ha. In the process of rushing towards Feng Bujue, the monster laughed almost maniacally. Its laughter was extremely creepy. Coupled with its terrifying appearance, even under the light, it looked extremely frightening. 10 meters, 7 meters, 3 meters. The monster's speed was faster than that of ordinary people. Just by looking at it, Feng Bujue knew that it was unlikely that he would be able to dodge the attack. But he still kept his cool. It was not until the monster was within 2 meters that Brother Ju roared, Igor? This roar made Igor, who was in a state of shock and sluggishness, come back to his senses instantly. After a reaction time of 0.01 seconds, Igor instinctively and without hesitation acted according to Feng Bujue's previous instructions. Whoosh! His rough arms and sharp chopping knife brought about a whirlwind. Consistent with Feng Bujue's speculation, the monster could not see Igor. Therefore, when the knife came, it was too late for it to dodge. Igor raised his hand and chopped down. The physical fitness of this VNO-9 enhanced human was not inferior to that of the monster. Wherever the blade passed, the skin split open, the flesh split open, the bones shattered, and the tendons snapped. The monster's head was chopped off, but not a drop of blood flowed out. It felt like a piece of meat taken out of a freezer. After its head was separated from its body, it let out a shrill scream. This sound definitely did not come from its throat. Even its throat was severed, so it was impossible for it to make such a loud noise. If he was not mistaken, it should be some kind of spirit that was using the dead's mouth to make a sound. "What the hell are you screaming for?" The next second, Feng Bujue raised one hand and grabbed the head that had flown in front of him due to inertia. Then, with a voice that was louder than the monster's, he roared at the monster's face. At that moment, even the monster was stunned. It did not expect Lin Huang to catch its head, nor did it expect that Lin Huang would dare to talk to it after catching its head. What was even more unexpected was that the kid in front of it had such a rude attitude. "Speak." Feng Bujue lifted the monster's head and stared at it. "What are you?" Hee. The monster did not answer. It only looked at Brother Ju with a mocking gaze and let out a creepy laugh. Faced with such a response, Feng Bujue was silent for 2 seconds. Then, he said in a cold tone, "I'll give you one more chance. Put away your perverted laughter and answer my question properly. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." Hee. However, the monster put on a fearless attitude and laughed even more arrogantly. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha. Pft. Its laughter was interrupted by a muffled sound. That was the sound of Feng Bujue grabbing its head and smashing its face against the wall. Ugh! After being smashed, the monster let out a muffled groan. Then, it seemed like it finally wanted to say something. "You! How dare you!" Pft. But Feng Bujue did not seem like he wanted it to say anything. What did you say?" "Puff puff puff. Your perverted laughter is too loud. I can't hear you." "Puff." Brother Ju said similar words in a lazy tone while smashing the monster's face against the wall again and again. The monster was already skin and bones. After being smashed like this, the skin on its face was almost gone and the bridge of its nose was broken. "Ugh, bro. Brother Feng." Igor was stunned for a while before he said, You can't make it speak, right?" Brother Ju heard this and put on a look of realization. He lifted the head in front of him again and looked at the monster's smashed face. "Is that so?" The monster's mouth was crooked. It said fiercely, "Little boy, you puff." Before it could finish, Brother Ju smashed it against the wall again. "When you call me that, you should be more respectful." After that, he immediately put the head back in front of him. However, the monster still had a backbone. "Don't think. I'll submit to you." Poof, poof, poof. "I can play like this all day," Feng Bujue said and hit the monster 5 or 6 more times. This time, when he brought the monster's head back in front of him, the monster's face was almost unrecognizable. "Brother, if you have any questions, I will tell you everything I know." It seemed that the monster's backbone and integrity had been shattered. Feng Bujue nodded with satisfaction and said, "First, tell me what you are." "We are you," the monster replied. "We are the madness hidden in your body. We are always eager to break free from the cage of reason. We are the darkness that you hide in bed every night. When you hide in the safe haven that we can't set foot in, we hibernate in silence and weakness." This was a special voice. When the dialogue was played, Feng Bujue entered a state that was like watching a CG movie. When the whole sentence was finished, the scenery in front of Brother Ju suddenly changed. In the blink of an eye, he was in his own mind palace. Memories swam in the air like a halo. Thoughts shrouded this vast space like fog. At this moment, time stopped. 6 silhouettes gathered in one place. 5 of them stood in a circle. In the circle was a birdcage-like cage more than 2 meters tall. And in the cage there was a 6th person. Although I don't know why I came in at this time, since I'm here, I might as well ask. The first Feng Bujua said. You heard what that guy said earlier, right? The second Feng Bujua said. I feel like you've seen me before. Before this, I thought there were only 5 people here. It was not until I started to interact with Thriller Paradise and gained the ability to enter the Mind Palace that I realized there is a 6th person, the third Feng Bujua said. Before this, I believed that cage was the seal placed on me by Woody. The 4th Feng Bujua looked at the cage and said, and you are the fear that sealed me. That was until I heard what you said earlier. The 5th Feng Bujua said, it made me realize that perhaps that cage has been there since the beginning. After the 5 of them finished talking, they were silent for a few seconds. Then, who are you? 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 Almost at the same second, they looked at the cage and used 5 slightly different tones to ask the same question. Ha! Moments later, the man in the cage sneered. Why are you questioning yourself? He used a question to answer their question. We are the same person. 2 seconds later, the man in the cage said, from the beginning, there are no secrets between us. Because all the answers are inside this palace. At this point, he reached his hand into his shirt pocket and took out a key. Seeing this, the 5 people outside the cage subconsciously reached their hands into their pocket. At that moment, each of the Feng Bujua realized that there was a key in their pocket. This cage has indeed been here since the beginning, the man in the cage said. Because we want it to exist. Because you are unwilling to come out? The first Feng Bujua asked. The man in the cage replied, but I have indeed come out. I know, the second Feng Bujua said, that day when we covered up the scene for Shao Tan, you came out. That day when we first came into contact with Gambling Emperor's Pavilion, you came out, the third Feng Bujua said. During the battle for the cloak, you came out, the 4th Feng Bujua said. And the 5th Feng Bujua continued, the day when Rui you left, you also came out. Because, from the beginning to the end, I can appear at any time according to my own will. The man in the cage continued their words and said, ordinary people will try their best to never come out of the cage. At this point, he spread his hands and smiled evilly. But we are not ordinary people. We are Feng Bujua. Chapter 1137. When Feng Bujua returned from the Temple of Thought, time in the outside world started to flow again. Brother Ju looked at the monster's head in his hand and continued his previous question. How many of you are there? The monster replied, including me, there are 12. When Brother Ju heard that, his expression changed slightly. This number was far from Feng Bujua's prediction. Without a doubt, Brother Ju knew the story of the Soviet Union's sleep experiment, and in his version, there were 5 people involved in the experiment. Even though in Thriller Paradise, it was normal for the plot to be changed or even overturned, but this scenario had clearly mentioned in the introduction that the experiment used 5 war criminals from World War II. In that case, why would the head in front of him say 12? Who are you trying to fool? You guys are Saint Seiyas. The next second, Feng Bujua purposely put on an angry expression and glared at the head. There are only 5 people involved in the experiment, and now you're telling me there are 12? Then, he raised his hand like he was going to punch the wall. Wait, I'm not lying to you, the monster quickly shouted. The other 7 were transformed by us? When he heard the word transformed, Feng Bujua stopped what he was doing. It was obvious that he was only pretending to be angry in order to test the other party's strength. Brother Ju had already considered the possibility of transformation in those few seconds, but he could not confirm whether his hypothesis was correct or not. At this point, he had to get the truth from the monster's mouth, But how to ask the question was a skill. If Feng Bujue used a questioning tone and asked, "Have you transformed some people?" the monster's first reaction would be, "This man doesn't know the answer, so I can lie to him." Even though "lie to him" did not mean that the monster would lie, the chance of the monster lying would definitely increase. However, if Feng Bujue used this method, the result would be very different. He first pretended to be angry and used an interrogative tone to list out the facts that he knew, which was there were only 5 people involved in the experiment. He would then change the focus of the question from "Why are there 12 people?" to "How dare you lie to me?" and use force to force the monster to respond. This way, the monster's first reaction would be, "I have to come up with an explanation to prove that I'm not lying." Therefore, he would reveal the information about transformation. Okay, even though I've explained it quite clearly, it might not be understood by everyone. Let me give an example that is easier to understand. For example, one day you went out to play after work and didn't come home until very late at night. At that time, if your wife asked, "Why are you so late? Did you go out to fool around again?" Most likely, you'll just make up some excuse like working overtime to fool her. But if your wife glared at you with a frying pan and yelled, "Bastard, you are a bastard! You're still? You didn't even call me at this hour. Speak. Did you have someone outside? Did you smuggle firearms? Are you the one called Heisenberg on the street?" At this time, you would definitely rush to answer, "No, I just went out to fool around." To sum up, Feng Bujue's questioning technique was based on this principle. "That's not right." 2 seconds later, Brother Ju followed the monster's words and asked, "There are so many people in this base. If you can transform, how can you only transform 7 people?" The monster replied, "Not everyone meets the conditions for transformation. Although all human beings have a crazy nature, some people's souls are not strong enough, and some people's bodies are not strong enough to withstand the ritual. These people can't survive the ritual. In addition, most of the people in this base died in the process of resisting us. Of course, the dead can't be transformed." Ritual, is it? Feng Bujue heard interesting words again. He instantly understood where the people who were caught alive by the demons went. Even Igor, who was next to him, realized this after thinking for a while. Then, last question, Feng Bujue said to the monster after a few seconds, "How do we leave this base?" This time, the monster was silent for a few seconds before replying, "Impossible." "What did you say?" Feng Bujue's sentence was not a question, but a threat. "It's just impossible." But the monster did not give in because what it said was true. "We can't find the exit." "What about your memory when you were human?" Feng Bujue asked again. "Every one of us retains all the memories when we were human," the monster said. "But, I don't know. I don't understand why. It's as if this part of the memory never existed." Hidden quest triggered. Before the monster's voice died away, the system voice sounded again. It seemed that the monster's dialogue had an extraordinary meaning. Feng Bujue immediately opened the game menu. He glanced at the mission tab, and the content of the hidden quest was Decipher Worldview. Decipher Worldview? Brother Bujue was confused. What is the meaning of this? If we're talking about the worldview, isn't it the setting of the SCP Foundation universe? If that's the case, I should have deciphered it already. In a solo scenario, there's no need to explain the worldview. As long as I can understand and confirm it on the subconscious level, it will be considered a successful solution. And this counts as a hidden quest? Abnormal, unnatural, uncoordinated, this feeling, like there was a prickle on his back, had been haunting Feng Bujue since the scenario started. And all of this seemed to have started when he saw that mirror. "All right, I've answered your question. What do you plan to do next?" At this time, the monster took the initiative to speak and taunted. "Kill me? Haha. Do you want me to teach you how to do that? Just destroy the brainstem, right? Feng Bujue replied in a relaxed tone. The monster heard that and was startled. It looked like Brother Bujue was right. Something that can be found through elimination. Feng Bujue continued as he glanced at the monster's headless body. After the decapitation, the body is crippled, but the head can still move normally. He paused and looked into the monster's eyes again. The brain has lost its blood supply and oxygen supply, and the vocal cords are gone, but it can still speak. He looked at the head in his hands like he was studying a scientific specimen. These are the characteristics of a typical parasitic spirit, and the parasitic part is very obvious. When Igor heard his lines, he was still confused. He did not understand them, but they were awesome. In general, you should be a kind of special consciousness that hides in a human's mind. When you lose control, you'll take over the control of the brain. Then, by stimulating the parts of the brain that normal people can't access, you'll stimulate the human body's potential and cause some kind of physiological mutation. As Feng Bujue said that, he squatted down and placed the monster's head on the ground. And in terms of mental energy, you're not as good as a normal ghost, but you're stronger than a normal human being. Even the monster itself could not sum up its own unique characteristics like Brother Ju did. But it knew that Brother Ju was not wrong. You're not afraid of death, and that can be inferred from your reaction when you were decapitated. Feng Bujue continued. But you have something that you're afraid of, or else you wouldn't have cooperated with me. When he said this, the monster's face changed involuntarily. Considering your nature and the upper limit of your ability, I think, Feng Bujue said, death for you should be a kind of release. It can free you from the shackles of your body. As for where you'll go after that, I don't know, and I'm not interested. He paused for half a second and said, life, of course, you can accept it. That way, you can use this body to slaughter or transform more people. At this point, Feng Bujue stood up. But, like this, half-dead, it seems to be more difficult to deal with. His words finally caused the monster to turn pale with fright. The main body of your parasite is in the brain. As long as this part is not destroyed, you can't leave this body. Feng Bujue continued. And, you obviously don't have the ability to heal yourself. If your head is cut off, it's cut off. There's basically no possibility of recovery. What are you doing? The monster yelled, looking frightened. You gave in to me before, not because it hurt when I threw you against the wall, but because you thought there would be no end to this. Feng Bujue said, as I said, I can play like this all day. But you can't stand it for a whole day, can you? He smiled, and it was a very evil smile. The smile was terrifying to the monster. Oh, in fact, I don't think you can stand it for even a few minutes. Brother Feng, Igor couldn't help but come over and ask Feng Bujue. At this moment, Igor's fear of the so-called devil had almost disappeared. In contrast, he felt that Brother Ju was a little more terrifying. You also only had a head left, Igor. What was the most terrifying feeling at that time? Feng Bujue turned to look at Igor and asked, was it death? I don't think so. Igor thought for a moment and replied, it's the feeling of despair and helplessness. Recalling the feeling at that time, he showed a look of fear. I don't know how long I'll stay in that state, and there's nothing I can do. It's worse than death. Haha, actually, you still have hope. Feng Bujue continued, as long as the oxygen and blood supply devices connected to your neck run out of power, or the VNO-9 in the container runs out, you should die. Although that kind of death may be slow and painful, it's a foreseeable future. As he spoke, Brother Ju looked at the monster's head on the ground again and smiled. But this is different. This is a spiritual creature, it won't die. And the pain it will experience in this state is far more than what you experience in the same state. Because it is the embodiment of the madness of human nature after it has been released, For it, the current situation where it can't move is 100 times worse than being suppressed in the cage of reason. Igor heard a hint of cruelty in Feng Bujue's tone because he seemed to have understood what he said and guessed what was going to happen next. So, what if I leave it here now? Try to imagine what will happen. As expected, Feng Bujue said that. Perhaps it will be found by someone, or perhaps no one will ever find it again. It will spend a very long time in this state of extreme pain, so long that it will be unimaginably long. Kill me! Kill me! Finally, the monster collapsed. It began to scream hysterically, desperately shaking its face and jaw, and wriggling on the ground with difficulty. Feng Bujue was very satisfied with this. It was also the first time he knew that the madness in human nature could also collapse, as long as the method of stimulation was right. Okay, Igor, it's almost time for us to go. At this time, Feng Bujue took off the last blood collection bag on his arm, and the blood in it was almost all transfused. Since we know the number of enemies, it's easier to deal with things. We just need to get rid of 11 more. No! Don't go! Kill me! The monster was still screaming at the top of his lungs on the ground. But Feng Bujue didn't even look at it. Without hesitation, he turned around and walked away. Igor, on the other hand, cast a complicated and seemingly sympathetic look at him. But he didn't mean to disobey Feng Bujue. He just quickly turned his head, picked up the toolbox, and trotted to catch up with his brother Bujue. Soon, their figures disappeared at the far end of the corridor. The only thing that remained in this place was an endless stream of shrill screams of agony. The repeated pleas of "kill me" reverberated in the empty corridor, causing one's hair to stand on end. At the same time, in Dr. Cox's office. "Did you see that, Doctor? Doctor?" A slightly trembling voice came from the communication channel. Of course. Cox looked at the screen with a serious expression and responded. Although each SCP-3232-1 is a unique specimen, at least in terms of personality, it's not much different from ordinary humans. The voice in the communication channel continued, but, this time, the sample seems to have some high IQ antisocial personality. Cox finished the other person's sentence and sneered, So what? Hearing this, the person on the other end of the communication channel was speechless. Although the proportion of SCP-3232-1 in the human population is low, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If SCP-3232-1 is a human from another dimension, then it's only a matter of time before such cases appear, right? Cox said. In my opinion, he appeared at the right time. Maybe this observation will be a historic one. At this point, a bold plan had begun to take shape in Dr. Cox's mind. Chapter 1138. After transfusing all 4 bags of blood, Feng Bujue felt much better. Even though there was still slight dizziness and nausea, it did not affect his movement anymore. He led Igor forward, and along the way, they discovered many more sealed doors. Similar to the 4 doors from before, they were all locked and airtight metal doors. Without opening them, it was impossible to tell what was inside. This time, Feng Bujue tried to pry open the lock. But in the end, when he poked the tool into the lock, he heard the system say, "Cannot be opened." Since it was, "cannot be opened" and not "require key" or "locked," Brother Ju confirmed that none of these doors could be opened. They were merely decorations on the scenario map. However, this point caused him to have some doubts. The scenario map is so big, but the space for exploration is so limited, he said to himself as he walked. After exiting the gravity gate, there is only one room that can be entered, and that interrogation room has nothing related to the main plot. It is purely a place for the players to replenish their equipment. He lifted his head to look ahead. And this map that is so similar, it hasn't changed at all. It looks so monotonous and repetitive. Brother Feng, look. There's no road ahead. At this moment, Igor's eyes widened as he pointed to the front. Oh, is that so? Feng Bujue could not see the end, but he did not express any objection because he knew that his eyesight was not as good as Igor's. After all, the latter was a cyborg. I can't see that far. Let's keep walking. Okay. Igor nodded and followed Brother Ju. Soon, the two reached the end of the corridor. There was nothing special there, and there was no room. There was only a gray wall that was similar to the rest of the corridor. Other than that, the end was not a dead end. There were forks on both sides. In other words, this was a T-junction. Feng Bujue stood at the junction and looked left and right. He realized that the scenery on both sides was basically the same, other than the details like the texture of the walls and floor that were hard for others to notice, or rather, they would not be able to remember them even if they noticed them. They were still the same corridors, the same chandelier, and the same metallic door. What is this? At this moment, Brother Ju finally realized what the strange feeling this script gave him was. That was a kind of crude feeling. To be more specific, other than the rooms that could be entered, the whole scenario revealed a problem, a lack of details. First of all, as mentioned earlier, it was one thing for such a large base to be built similarly everywhere, but under this premise, it was illogical to not have a single road sign. Secondly, it wasn't just the road signs. There were also many details that should have existed that didn't exist. For example, electrical wires and pipes. The chandelier on the ceiling of the corridor was designed to be hung by a single wire, and the end of the wire was directly connected to the ceiling. But in the corridor, there was not a single light switch. This meant that there were two conclusions. 1. As long as there was electricity in the base, the lights in the corridor would be on and would never be turned off. 2. The switches for the lights were gathered at some kind of control center. The possibility of the latter was close to zero. The technology of the 1940s might not have been able to do that, but even if it could in this base that had no signs, no surveillance, and no way to differentiate between different areas, how would the controller know which area they were controlling? For example, if I gave you a remote control and told you that you could use it to control all the lights in a certain building, but I wouldn't tell you which switch was for which floor, and you wouldn't be able to see the building, then what was the point of controlling the light? Of course, this could be explained by the fact that the lights in the corridor were never turned off, so Feng Bujue did not dwell on it too much. But there was one last problem that Brother Ju could not accept. If there were no exposed wires and pipes, he would have treated it as if the whole base was wired, but there was not even a single air vent. What was going on? This was an underground base. Even if it was not completely sealed, there had to be air vents, and there had to be plenty of them. Initially, Feng Bujue thought that he would be able to see a few if he expanded his exploration range, but along the way, he did not see even one. At that moment, after Brother Ju confirmed the lack of details characteristic, he realized that there was something wrong with this scenario map itself. The base did not look like something created by Thriller Paradise, but more like something created in Minecraft. In fact, even in Minecraft, it was possible to create a building that was more complicated than this. Then, the hidden worldview should be related to this scenario map, right? Feng Bujue wondered. Could it be this place is similar to the sandbox created by the anomalies? And it's not even ready yet? Pa. Just as Brother Ju was thinking, a series of hurried footsteps came from his side. Be careful. It's him. Igor's sight and hearing were both better than Feng Bujue, so his reaction was faster than the latter. Oh. However, Feng Bujue's calmness was not something that Igor could match. After being reminded, Brother Ju stopped thinking. He stared with his dead fish eyes and said listlessly, "The one with the bare feet, right?" Just from the sound of the footsteps, they knew that the person was not wearing shoes. Furthermore, Igor said, "It's him," so this meant that the person was someone that they had met before. Based on these 2 points, it was clear who the person was. Keek. At that moment, the barefoot man was laughing weirdly as he rushed over from several meters away. He was at least 3 times faster than the one with shoes. Igor. Fong Bujue used a calm tone to call the captain of the Soviet team next to him. Yes. When he answered, Igor had already put down the toolbox and gripped the cleaver in his hand tightly. Same old rules, you know, Brother Jew said. Okay. With his previous experience, Igor was no longer afraid of these so-called demons. With the premise of abandoning fear, his combat ability had become stronger, and his attacks were faster and more accurate. 2 seconds later, there was the sound of wind being cut, and the cleaver was aimed at the barefoot man's neck. The same scenario, the same result. The world in the eyes of the monsters was different from normal humans. For example, when Fong Bujue looked at Thriller Paradise through the data perspective, it was completely different from the normal perspective. Translator. WQL Editor. Alim, in the eyes of the barefoot man, the corridor was a dark space. All the landforms and objects were shadows while all the light sources were hazy and cold. The only bright color in his eyes was red, the red of blood. From his perspective, Fong Bujue was a human silhouette that radiated the color of blood, and Igor, including the clothes on Igor's body and the cleaver in his hand, they all melted into the surrounding darkness. Therefore, when the barefoot man realized that the cleaver was coming, he was already unable to stop and evade the attack. The laughter stopped abruptly because of the cleaver in the neck, and the head flew forward due to inertia. 2 seconds later, Fong Bujue caught the barefoot man's head and said, this is a familiar scene. How is this possible? The barefoot man was undoubtedly able to speak normally with only his head left. Okay, let's make this short. Fong Bujue looked at the barefoot man and said, if you don't cooperate, I will place your head somewhere that will not be discovered for decades. If you cooperate, I will kill you in a moment. Do you understand? Hearing that, the barefoot man was stunned for a few seconds before he replied, understood. How did you find me? Fong Bujue did not say we, but I, because he knew that the barefoot man could not see Igor, and he did not want to expose this. I can sense the blood flow in a living person's body. The barefoot man replied. If you are far away it is blurry, but the closer you are, the clearer it becomes. Fong Bujue raised his eyebrows. Then, in the operating room, why didn't you discover me? What operating room? The barefoot man could not see any details of the scene. He could only see light and shadows, so he did not know which room he had entered was the operating room. Other than that, it was also because of this that he was not affected by SCP-1011. All I know is, I felt that there was someone nearby in a certain area, but I couldn't find him even after searching for a long time. After a few seconds, Barefoot continued, then, I guessed that the person might not be on this floor, but one of the floors above or below, so I left. Wait. When Fong Bujue heard this, his expression changed. This base has more than one floor? Yes, there are 4 floors. 1 floor above ground and 3 underground. We are currently on the 2nd underground floor, the barefoot man replied. You've been to all 4 floors? Brother Bujue asked. Do you know how to get out? No. The barefoot man showed a complicated expression. In my memory, this base has 4 floors, but now I can't find the exit. Why do you have that kind of memory? Fong Bujue asked again. The 5 people who participated in the experiment were all war criminals, so there was no reason for them to know the structure of this base. War criminals? The barefoot man was stunned. You mean the first experiment? These 5 words were like the first torrent that broke through a dam, causing Fong Bujue's thoughts to spread like wildfire. I say. After 2 seconds of silence, Fong Bujue asked in a low voice, how many sleep experiments were conducted here? 3, the barefoot man replied. Can you take me to the experiment records? Fong Bujue asked again. This question made the barefoot man hesitate for a moment. No, the world in my eyes is different from the world you see. Although I remember the way, I don't know where I am at this moment. Then I'll give you a fixed coordinate. Can you find the way based on your memory? Feng Bujue asked again. Fixed coordinate? The barefoot man did not seem to understand what Brother Bujue meant. Very simple. Feng Bujue replied. For example, he turned to look at the side of the T-junction. If I take you to a corner on this floor, can you tell me how many intersections we have to pass from that corner, and how many doors we have to stop at to find the experiment report? The barefoot man understood this time, but he replied, I can, but why don't you find it yourself? Isn't there a sign in the corridor? What did you say? Feng Bujue's expression changed abruptly. The barefoot man thought that Zhang Heng did not hear him clearly, so he said, There is a sign on the road. Can't you read it? The next second, Feng Bujue immediately turned his head and looked at Igor. Is there one? Igor froze for a moment, then shook his head. Then, Feng Bujue looked at the barefoot man again. In your memory, this base, is there a sign? Of course there is. The barefoot man replied in a matter-of-fact tone. This base is built like a chessboard. The passages are all straight and intertwined vertically. If there is no sign, who can tell where they are? Then, in your memory, Feng Bujue continued to ask, is there a light switch on the wall of the corridor? And is there a vent in the corridor? What the hell are you talking about? This time, the barefoot man asked, what happened in this base? Judging from his tone, the answer was obvious, yes. However, the reality was that Brother Ju did not see any of these things. For a few seconds, Feng Bujue thought that his vision or mental state was affected, causing him to be unable to see those details. But Igor also said that there was no such thing, which meant that it was not a problem in that regard. This is getting weirder and weirder, Feng Bujue thought to himself. Could it be that Igor is also a figment of my imagination? He quickly rejected that hypothesis. Impossible. He has to be real. I've had physical contact with him, and he helped me carry the blood collection bag. He carried the toolbox along the way, and he even killed 2 monsters. If Igor is an illusion, then everything in this scenario so far has been an illusion, hasn't it? With that in mind, Brother Ju had a flash of inspiration. Wait a minute, illusion? He could not help but mumble softly. Lack of details. There are details in the NPC's memory. It is not a visual or mental interference. Illusory. There is a problem with this scenario itself. It is like a sandbox that has not been made properly. Sandbox. Not made properly? A series of information fragments flashed through Feng Bujue's mind, and in a very short amount of time, they spread out like water in a sponge, giving rise to many hypotheses and hypotheses. Finally, at the end of the inference map, there was an area that slowly became clearer. Ha! At that moment, Feng Bujue revealed a confident smile that he had not seen in a long time. It is not that it has not been made properly, but that is the best it can do. He raised his eyes to look into the distance, and his focus appeared to be on the back of the corridor. What the anomalies can do, the NPCs can do as well. Since Origin can create a sandbox, then the SCP Foundation. Chapter 1139. About 20 minutes later, Feng Bujue came to the corner of the base with Barefoot's head. Igor still walked in front of him with a weapon and some tools, acting as a bodyguard and pathfinder. Okay, we've reached the corner. From here, how do we get to the room where the experiment report is stored? Feng Bujue asked Barefoot after he stood still. I'll make it clear in advance, Barefoot replied. Because you said that you can't see the sign, I can't confirm which of the 4 corners of the base this corner is. So, the destination may not be the right one. It's okay, Feng Bujue said. If this is wrong, we'll just go to another corner. It'll just take more time. He paused for a moment. But I'll also make it clear in advance. He cast a cold gaze at Barefoot. It doesn't matter if we go to the wrong room, but if we're led to some strange place later, such as a trap, or a place where your kind is, then you'll have to pray for yourself afterward. This sentence made Barefoot's expression change. Indeed, Barefoot had a similar idea on the way here, and he was just about to put it into action. However, Feng Bujue gave him a warning in advance. I've already seen through your little trick. If you dare to use it, you'll have to think about the consequences. Humph. After a few seconds of hesitation, Barefoot had no choice but to compromise. He snorted and said, "Then I'll also make it clear in advance. The room where the experiment report is stored is very close to the room where we held the ceremony. Although we've dispersed to different parts of the base after the ceremony, I can't be sure if there's anyone else nearby." He paused for half a second. "So, if you meet my kind on the way, or if you're attacked near that room, don't say that I'm deliberately leading you into a trap." These words showed that the monster had already made his bottom line clear. 2 seconds later, Feng Bujue replied with a blank expression, "Okay, tell me, how do we get there?" The corridor was straight and bright. There were basically no obstacles, so Brother Bujue and Igor walked very quickly. After walking for about 12 minutes, they arrived at the destination that Barefoot had told them about. "We didn't meet anything along the way." Feng Bujue stood at the door of the room. "Maybe this is the wrong place?" His reasoning was not wrong because when he tried to open the door, the prompt he got was, "Can't open." So, they could only choose to set off to another corner to relocate their coordinate. This process would have taken about half an hour, and this was on the basis that they did not encounter any monsters or other incidents along the way. But they were lucky. After walking straight to the other side of the base for 7 or 8 minutes, Barefoot suddenly said, "Wait, I found the room of the ritual room." Hearing that, Feng Bujue stopped moving and lowered his head to ask, "Which one?" "It's at the fork we passed just now. Turn left. There's a lot of blood in that ritual room. Although it's no longer flowing, I can still feel it from this distance." After Brother Bujue heard this, he immediately gave Igor a look. The latter understood and went into a state of alert, holding his sword. The two retreated a few meters and turned in the direction that Barefoot said. At this time, Igor looked focused and moved his feet quietly. It was obvious that this was not the first time he had experienced this kind of situation. Although Igor was not a professional soldier, he did fight in wars and had quite a lot of combat experience. In 1942, in the cold winter full of death and covered in ice and snow, the Soviets, Romanians, Hungarians, Germans gathered in a place called Stalingrad. They used their blood to write a very important chapter in the history of human war. For the Soviets, Stalingrad was a place they absolutely did not want to lose. This city not only had an irreplaceable symbolic meaning, but more importantly, it was the traffic throat of the central area of the Soviet Union to the important economic areas in the south. It was north of Moscow, south of the Persian Gulf, and south of the Soviet Union's main food, coal, and oil production areas. If they lost here, they would probably lose the whole war. Perhaps, the whole history of human beings would be rewritten because of this. On July 28 of the same year, Stalin issued the famous Order No. 227, "Don't take a step back," and Igor was one of the members of the Soviet army who received this order. He was only 19 years old that year. He did not want to go to the battlefield. He only wanted to be a worker, or a shoemaker like his dead father. He hoped to live a stable life, he hoped to be in love like a normal young man, he hoped to be filial to his sick mother, and he hoped to feed his starving sister every day. However, the war left him with no other choice. Stalingrad in October was known as the Furnace of Murder. Igor stayed in this furnace until the end of the war. As a new recruit who hadn't received much military training, this could be said to be a miracle. The next spring, Igor was forced to retire from the army because of an injury and amputation. When he returned home, his mother and sister were already dead, and the already poor house was left with only 4 walls. He was only 20 years old, but he became a crippled homeless man. In this way, 7 years passed by in a hurry. These should have been the best 7 years of his life, but for him, every day felt like a year. Until one day, some people in military uniforms came to tell him that he was selected by the government to receive a free treatment program. At that time, Igor, who was already terminally ill, naturally had no reason to refuse. But what he did not expect was that he was not there to receive any treatment, but to be an experimental subject. Don't be so careful. Barefoot's sudden words broke the brief silence. There won't be an ambush in the room. How do you know? Feng Bujua looked at him. You shouldn't be able to perceive each other's location, right? If those monsters could perceive each other, they would not have to worry about being beheaded and left somewhere undiscovered. So, this inference must be correct. Because we won't stay in one place and not move, Barefoot responded. Calm, waiting, these make us crazy. Well, it's a valid reason, Feng Bujua said and winked at Igor again. Igor, who was already standing in front of the door, reached out and pushed the metal door panel. Squeak! The sound of the metal shaft turning made people's hair stand on end. Behind the open door, the smell of blood wafted out. Igor's sense of smell had also become very sensitive, so standing there made him feel quite uncomfortable. At this time, Feng Bujua stepped forward and took the lead in entering the room before Igor. Here, let me do it. He was so confident because he had already confirmed that there were no monsters in the room when he stood behind Igor. The room wasn't very big, covering an area of about 30 square meters. The lights in the room were switched on, so the room was clear at a glance. Opposite the door, there was a cement table that couldn't be moved. The table was just big enough for a person to lie down on. At this moment, the cement table looked like a chopping board that had been used many times but had never been cleaned. Layers of blood stains of varying depths covered its surface. It was also mixed with flesh, viscera fragments, hair, broken bones, and many other indistinguishable things. After standing in the room and looking around, Feng Bujua picked up Barefoot's head and looked directly at him. Explain the principle of the ritual. We can cut people open without letting them shed a drop of blood, Barefoot answered with a lot of information. Brother Barefoot's answer contained a lot of information. It can also make people bleed out without any wounds. As he spoke, he glanced at the surface of the cement table. Under the blood stains there's a ritual circle. It was drawn by the Whisperer. Only he knows how to use power. Whisperer? Feng Bujua asked in a probing tone, motioning for a more detailed explanation. I don't know what he is. All I have in my mind is the name Whisperer, just like how I know how to walk, Barefoot answered. Barefoot continued. He looks no different from us, but he seems to know more than we do. Can the ritual only be carried out when the Whisperer is present? Feng Bujua asked again. No, as long as the circle is drawn, anyone can complete it. Barefoot had just said the word complete when he felt that something was wrong. Hey, what are you doing? Feng Bujua ignored him. He just took 2 steps forward and used Barefoot's face to wipe the ritual table as if nothing had happened. A few seconds later, he used a series of rough movements to wipe away a large part of the blood stains, revealing the circle. Oh, King Solomon's spell system. Feng Bujua stared at the circle for a few seconds and muttered to himself. Bastard! What are you doing? The next second, Barefoot, whose face was smeared with filth, shouted angrily. Feng Bujua ignored his complaints and silently engraved the circle in his mind. Then, he said in a calm tone, Okay, bring us to the room where the experiment report is. Since you know that it's not far from here, it shouldn't be a problem to locate it from here, right? Damn it. Barefoot was furious, but there was nothing he could do. He had already fallen into the hands of others. Moreover, on the way here, Feng Bujue had already told him how he dealt with the monster from before. Barefoot did not want to end up like him, or even worse. Therefore, he could only continue to swallow his anger and obediently point the way for Brother Bujue and the others. After coming out of the ritual room, they turned right, passed through 2 crossroads, and turned left. The first room was the archive room. The door here was also locked. When Feng Bujue tried to pick the lock, he received a special system prompt. This lock is rusty. Even with the key, it can't be opened. Brute force seems to be a better choice. The prompt is quite clear. When the voice sounded in his ear, Feng Bujue calculated in his heart. But, without Igor's help, how can a player open it alone? Even though he had a set of ready-made solutions, he would still think about such problems. That way, he would be able to gather more information. About 5 seconds later, Feng Bujue came up with 3 possible ways to open the door. 1. Lure a monster, use the monster's movement, and borrow the monster's strength to open the door. The possibility of this hypothesis was the lowest because it was too difficult to implement. Of course, it was not completely impossible because the monster's vision was very limited. They usually had to walk very close to the door before they could find it. Furthermore, if the player ran at full speed, their speed would not be much slower than the monster's. Originally, the scenario was designed to allow the player to escape by using the maze-like terrain and the monster's vision. Therefore, Brother Bujue still considered this as one of the possibilities. 2. Borrow the power of an NPC to open the door. This NPC naturally did not refer to a hidden reward like Igor, but a character that had a certain connection to the main plot. Perhaps there was someone among the monsters that could be negotiated with, like the Whisperer or one of the victims who had been transformed by the ritual. However, Brother Bujue could not verify that for now. 3. And the possibility with the highest probability was for the player to kick the door open. Feng Bujue gave this possibility a try. Without saying a word, he used a roundhouse kick to kick the door lock. When kicking a door, side kicks and roundhouse kicks are more efficient than kicking the door from the front. Most movies and TV shows use a roundhouse kick to kick the door from the front, which is not scientific. But the door didn't budge. At that moment, Feng Bujue came to another conclusion. Assuming that of the 3 options, the probability of the first one was too low to be feasible, and the probability of the second one did not exist, and considering only the third option, as long as one of the prerequisites was met, the plan could be realized. And that prerequisites were for the player to inject himself with VNO9 and successfully mutate. Igor. After thinking for a moment, Feng Bujue said, "Here. I'll have to trouble you." Brother Ju still had no intention of implementing the conclusion generated by multiple hypotheses, but, after thinking about it, he had more confidence that VNO9 could be successfully used on the player. Simply put, because there was more information available, the theoretical probability of this had increased. Okay, no problem. Igor did not know what Brother Ju was thinking. He merely nodded and then took 3 steps forward and kicked the door from the side. Bang! Igor's first kick was just a test to see how it felt, so he did not use his full strength. However, even he didn't expect that this kick would directly kick open the heavy metal door. Even a piece of the wall beside the door lock was broken. Chapter 1140. Igor's surprise did not last long. He was getting more and more used to his power. After breaking the door, he stood at the door and scanned the room with his eyes that could see in the dark. He then turned to Brother Ju and said, "There's no one inside, at least I don't see anyone." Okay. Feng Bujue nodded at him and walked forward. He took the lead and entered the room. Based on his experience, Brother Jew found the light switch on the wall on the left side of the door. When the light was turned on, the whole picture of the archive room was revealed to Feng Bujue. It was a space of only about 10 square meters. Other than the area near the door, there was a circle of filing cabinets along the wall. In a sense, this room was indeed a trap. It was a trap that made Feng Bujue, who was a reader, waste a lot of time. Fortunately, the system had made some adjustments to this. Can't open it. There's nothing valuable in it. The files are stained, and the handwriting is difficult to distinguish. Similar system notifications continued to ring out for the next 10 minutes or so. Feng Bujue tried to open every drawer of the filing cabinets, and the prompts he got were basically the same as the above three. He was not surprised by this. In fact, he was more than happy to see this. Otherwise, with his personality and habits, he might have spent a few hours here looking at a bunch of documents that might have nothing to do with the main plot. Hey, I say, you're the experimental subject E107, aren't you? At this time, Brother Jew had already handed Barefoot over to Igor. While Brother Jew was flipping through the files, Barefoot whispered to Igor, "Looks like VNO9 succeeded. You seem to know a lot." Igor's tone was cold, completely unlike the way he spoke to Brother Jew. Obviously, Igor did not have a good impression of the owner of the head in his hand. Even if Barefoot was not a devil, he was a member of an organization that used Igor as a guinea pig. This could be deduced from his knowledge of the base's structure. Trust me, I don't know much. Barefoot was not bothered by Igor's indifferent tone. Instead, he smiled and said, "Yes, I was a staff member of this base, but I'm just a nobody. Believe me, I hate the people in this base as much as you do." "Because they treated you as an experimental subject?" Igor asked tentatively. Humph. Barefoot seemed to have recalled some unpleasant memories, and there was a hint of resentment in his tone. When the second experiment had an accident, they did not hesitate to seal off the area around the experiment area and trapped me and more than 10 other people there. He paused and looked up at Igor. Although the other party was just a tall shadow in his line of sight, he still gave him a sinister look. "But, from the looks of it, what happened to you and me was a blessing in disguise. Ha ha ha." Just as he let out that creepy laugh, Feng Bujue had already gone through all the filing cabinets and confirmed that there was only one filing cabinet that could be opened, and in that filing cabinet, only the documents in one drawer could be identified. As for all the other cabinets and all the drawers, they were all either unopenable or unreadable. Okay. It seems that's it. Feng Bujue returned to the drawer, took out all the documents inside, and sat cross-legged on the ground. Oh right. After sitting down, Feng Bujue opened the first stack of documents and said to Igor without raising his head, "Igor, close the door." Igor heard this and turned to look at the metal door with the broken lock. He wondered, this door. Is there any point in closing it? It's relatively safer to close it. Feng Bujue was already multitasking at this time. While reading the contents of the documents, he responded, "In case other mutants pass by the door, if the door is closed, they are likely to pass by without knowing." When Igor heard this, he instinctively looked down at the head in his hand. But, what if this guy immediately screams when he hears footsteps outside? This was indeed a problem because Barefoot did not need a vocal organ to speak. Unless he was killed, it would be useless to pull out his tongue. He could still send messages to the people outside. "Then you throw his head at me immediately." The next second, Feng Bujue came up with a countermeasure almost without hesitation. When his kind hear the sound and come in from the door, they will only see him and me. Their attention will definitely be attracted to me. At that time you can do it. Humph. Unexpectedly, Barefoot sneered and said, "Even so, I can still remind them to be wary of Igor through words, can't I?" "You can try. When the time comes, your voice will be louder, or my folk song will be smoother." Feng Bujue replied calmly, taking a step back. Even if your reminder really works, the result will be the same. According to my observation, with Igor's current physical ability, coupled with his invisible characteristic in your eyes, even if you are prepared, you are still no match for him. After listening to Brother Bujue's words, Barefoot snorted gloomily and was speechless. Barefoot, who had personally suffered a blow from Igor, understood that Feng Bujue's analysis was correct. Take himself as an example. Even if Barefoot had hands and feet now and was on guard, he had no confidence in defeating Igor. Putting aside the other miscellaneous enhancements, Igor, a VNO-9 transformed human, was almost on par with the sleep experiment mutants like them. On this premise, Igor also had stealth and self-healing abilities that they did not have. To sum up, as long as Igor was a little more cautious and wretched in battle, he might not lose even if he fought 1 against 3. Creak. A few seconds later, Igor had gone to close the door. When he saw Feng Bujue flipping through a stack of documents attentively, he knew that it would take a lot of time. So, he also found an empty place to sit down and take a break. At the same time, Feng Bujue had already read 1/3 of the content of the first document with his amazing reading speed. Well, this group of people. Although he had only read 1/3 of the document, Brother Ju had already begun to complain in his heart. Can you be any more ridiculous? The first document he read was an application for a research project, codenamed the Meili Yaowa Project. The general idea of this project was to use sophisticated means to oppress and damage the right brain of human beings, so as to achieve the goal of making the left brain more developed. For some reason, the person who proposed this project thought that the left brain was more useful than the right brain. Then, this person had another theory, and that was the incomplete induced evolution theory. And the examples he gave seemed to be quite plausible. For example, blind people's hearing would be more developed than ordinary people's, people with a disabled left leg would have a stronger right leg, deaf and mute people's vision would be relatively sharp, and a bachelor's arm would be thicker. Well, I just wrote this one casually, and so on. In short, the logic of this research project was that as long as the right brain was disabled, the left brain would be stronger. Before Feng Bujue finished reading the document, he had a strong feeling that the person who proposed this project might be disabled. Although I know that Germany during World War II, the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and the United States during any period were doing strange research. When Feng Bujue finished reading the first document, he whispered softly, "But this kind of setting is really amazing. I suddenly feel like the zombie is becoming more and more reliable." 3 minutes later, Brother Ju began to read the second document. This one was indeed more reliable because this was the experimental record of the first sleep experiment. The content at the beginning was the same as the introduction in the opening cinematic, so Feng Bujue glanced at the section. They had enough food to last for a month, some books, running water, toilets, and a few beds, and continued reading. In the first 5 days, nothing unusual happened. However, the dialogue between the prisoners became more and more emotional. They began to confide in each other. On the 6th day, the situation took a turn for the worse. The prisoners suddenly became paranoid and crazy. They stopped chatting and began to blame each other for the current situation. In the next few days, the prisoners sat back to back as if they were angry. Through the microphone, we heard strange, muffled murmurs. On the 9th day, one of the prisoners panicked. He screamed and ran back and forth in the room. He kept shouting until he lost his voice. In the end, he could only make a weak whimper. The other 4 prisoners seemed to be unmoved by what was happening in the room, but 2 of them were observed quietly tearing paper from a book and excreting on the paper. They then stuck the paper to the glass porthole in the room. On the 14th day, we could no longer see what was happening in the room. The porthole looked like a big fish tank covered in excrement. On the 15th day there was no sound in the room. It became very quiet, but the oxygen detector showed that there were still signs of life in the room. Although we couldn't see what was happening in the room, this abnormal silence made us wonder if they had fainted. At 11:30 that night, we unanimously decided to open the room for inspection. We told them through the broadcast that a team of staff would enter the room to check the microphone and clean the porthole. We asked the experimental subjects to stay away from the door and lie on the ground. Otherwise, they would be shot. Of course, considering the mental and physical condition of these people, we couldn't rule out the possibility that some of them would take the initiative to die. Therefore, we declared that as long as they were willing to cooperate, one of them would be released. After the broadcast, the dead silence in the room continued until a trembling voice said into the microphone, "We don't need you to give us freedom anymore." 15 minutes later, we entered the room with a team of assault soldiers. What greeted us was a scene of purgatory. They didn't eat the food we gave them. At least, they haven't eaten for a week. We saw blood seeping out of their mouth. Everyone's mouth was stuffed with something. If I'm not mistaken, it should be their own flesh. We noticed that the muscles on everyone's face and body were greatly damaged, and these wounds were made by their bare hands and not teeth. In other words, they tore themselves apart with their hands and ate them as food. 2 of the experimental subjects had a lot of flesh torn apart. Their chests were exposed, and part of their internal organs had been dug out. However, their bodies were still functioning normally. I don't know how this works, but a person with half a lung missing can still speak. Before this, he was still alive. We had to stop the experiment and enter the medical treatment process. However, after turning off the TS gas, the 5 experimental subjects suddenly went berserk. They used a strange power that I couldn't understand to launch a surprise attack on us. They killed 3 guards in an instant and killed 2 more people while the others were subduing them. In the end, we managed to subdue 3 of the experimental subjects, and the other 2 can be dissected directly. On the morning of the 16th day, we dissected the first one. He was the one who started screaming at the beginning. We now know why he stopped screaming after that. His vocal cords were completely torn apart. Also, part of the flesh stuffed in his mouth didn't seem to be his own. It seemed to be the sinus of another experimental subject. Reading up to this point, Fong Bujua noticed that the person who wrote the experiment records was becoming more and more emotional and dramatic. Moreover, when he was describing the experimental subjects, he was no longer describing the feelings of humans. It was more like he was describing something. At the same time, the 3 people we tied up are undergoing different degrees of surgery. They all requested that no anesthesia be used during the surgery to keep them awake. Actually, it wouldn't have mattered even if they hadn't made such a request. We've already discovered that tranquilizers have no effect on them. Even if we injected 3 doses of tranquilizers into one of them, the experimental subjects would still be alive and kicking. The first subject who underwent the surgery died of excessive blood loss. At least from the symptoms, it was excessive blood loss. As for why he was still so strong despite having 9 broken bones, we have no idea. The second experimental subject showed a strange satisfaction during the surgery. He was like a drug addict, smiling at us the whole time. However, after the surgery, he got angry and asked us to cut him open again. The third experimental subject kept nagging that he had to stay awake. From his words, I vaguely heard that he seemed to be saying that he was going to be free soon. Chapter 1141. As much as we wanted to complete the experiment, the last 2 test subjects were not sent back to their cells. One of them fell asleep after the operation. I believe that was the effect of the previous sedative, or perhaps it was because he had not been exposed to TS gas for a long time. In any case, he died quickly after he fell asleep. It was as if sleep had caused him to lose his abnormal bodily functions. The remaining test subject became extremely agitated after he heard about the death of his partner, and he went berserk again. He grabbed the guard's gun and killed 2 of my colleagues. He threatened us to send him back to the room and release the gas again. At that time, Professor Andre ambushed the test subject from behind and pointed the gun at its head. He asked, "What are you people?" Fong Bujue had heard the next part of the record before, and it matched the description of the monster that was killed by Igor. The rest of the document was some photos and autopsy record. Brother Ju looked through them and did not find anything of value. Basically, that was the record of the first sleep experiment. Even though there were some differences in the details and the narrative angle was different, overall, it was similar to the Soviet sleep experiment that Fong Bujue knew. One thing worth noting was, the record mentioned the so-called TS gas. This was the first time that Brother Ju had come across this term. In the various versions of the story that he knew, they all mentioned a kind of gas that could keep people excited, but none of the versions mentioned what it was. However, in this thriller paradise scenario, the system gave the gas a specific name. Other than that, near the end of the record, there was a mention of Professor Andre. This person's name was the same as the person who escaped from the first-person perspective in the cinematic. Brother Ju believed that there was a high chance that they were the same person. From the cinematic's plot and the information that they knew so far, something must have happened to Professor Andre during the last 2 experiments. Nicole. When he opened the 3rd file, Fong Bujue asked Barefoot, "Do you know a Dr. Andre?" On the way here, Brother Ju had already confirmed Barefoot's name. This guy's real name was Nicholas. Dr. Andre? Nicholas's expression changed when he heard the name. Why? Did you see any interesting records? Fong Bujue continued unhurriedly, "If you dare to answer my question with a question again, I will throw you into the manure pipe." Nigulai pursed his lips and confessed helplessly, "Professor Andre is a whisperer." He paused. "He and I are both survivors of the 2nd experimental accident." "Oh." Fong Bujue responded and then began to browse the 3rd file, the 2nd sleep experiment. The panic effect caused by the failure of the previous experiment has not subsided, but under Dr. Andre's insistence, we began the 2nd experiment. The experimental specimens and experimental methods used in this experiment will be adjusted so that we can obtain more diverse data. We chose 15 prisoners ranging from 30 to 60 years old who are facing the death penalty. All of the subjects are male. The experiment will be carried out in groups. The first group has 5 people, the same number as the first experiment. The second group has 3 people. The third and fourth groups have 2 people each. The remaining 3 are held separately in groups 5, 6, and 7. The supplies provided in the cells are as usual, which is food, some books, running water, toilets, and beds that can last for a month. Based on the previous experience, the cells selected for this experiment are equipped with high portholes to prevent the experimental subjects from blocking them. The prisoners were told that as long as they can stay awake for 30 days, they will be exempted from the death penalty and will receive a handsome reward. The experiment has begun. TS gas has begun to be released. The first 5 days, everything was normal. This time, the prisoners were generally less educated, and they were more wary of each other. Almost no one read books, and no one was willing to talk. On the 8th day, a fight broke out in Group 1. Although we immediately intervened to stop it, one of the prisoners died on the spot. The other 4 suffered different degrees of injuries, but it was not to the extent that they needed surgery. On the 9th day, the experimental subject of Group 7 committed suicide. He used all his strength to slam into the corner of the metal bed frame. His skull was crushed on the spot, and there was no time to save him. On the 10th day, the 3 people of Group 2 gathered under the porthole and looked up without saying a word. Although the room was equipped with one-way glass, according to the observer, their eyes were fixed on us and moved with us as if they could see through the glass. On the 11th day, the experimental subject of Group 6 covered his head and hid under the bed. In a pleading tone, he kept repeating the short sentence, "Don't come over." At the same time, a second fight broke out in Group 1. This time, we did not go in to stop it because everything happened too quickly. By the time the observer realized it, the two survivors had already started to devour the bodies of the two dead. On the 12th day, the members of Group 3, 4, and 5, whose conditions were more stable, stopped eating and started to draw on the wall with their excrement. The content they drew seemed to be some kind of pattern with special words. This part of the content has been handed over to the Theology and Linguistics Department for research. Below this record there were several pictures attached. Without a doubt, they were the things that the experimental subjects drew when they painted the wall with their excrement. It really is from the King Solomon school. Fong Bujue stared at the excrement for a few seconds, and surprisingly, he understood the meaning of one of the pictures. The combination of words on this picture. It means to summon something from the other side. On the 15th day, the remaining two people of Group 1 started to throw excrement at the porthole, but due to the design of the porthole, their action had little effect. On the 17th day, the experimental subject of Group 6 tried to commit suicide by slamming into the wall. After we entered the room to subdue him, he lost all his strength in the struggle and died quickly. Before he died, he showed a very relieved expression. So far, it could be seen that this record and the record of the first sleep experiment were written by the same person, and the typewriter used was the same. But, from the next paragraph onwards, the recorder had changed. This could be seen from the tone of the recording, the words used, and the way the sentences were written. Fong Bujue was a writer, after all, so he was quite confident about this assumption. On the 20th day, one of the people of Group 2 said into the microphone, "It's time." Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. After the experimental from Group 2 said that, all the cells started to behave strangely. The two experimentals from Group 1 smashed open the metal door with great force and escaped from the cell. The experimentals from Group 3, 4, and 5 used some kind of method to create an unknown cover on the surface of the porthole. Their subsequent actions are unknown. The three experimental subjects of Group 2 jumped out from the room, broke through the bulletproof porthole, and invaded the observation room. The last sound we heard on the walkie-talkie was a scream and a strange tearing sound, and then the communication was cut off. After consulting with the higher-ups, we sealed off the entire experimental area and waited for reinforcements. 6 hours later, the cleanup team armed with flamethrowers began to clean up the area. At this time, all the experimental subjects we encountered had become creatures that were obviously different from humans. This description was accompanied by a few photos. Although the photos only showed a few burned corpses, it was obvious that the owners of the corpses had become the same mutants as the barefoot guy. We found 5 survivors, Dr. Andre, Dr. Josh, the researcher Nicholas, and 2 guards, Alexander and Yakov. They were all attacked by the experimental subjects, but they were not killed. According to Dr. Andre, the experimental subjects seemed to want to take them to complete some kind of ritual, but they were interrupted. For the treatment plan and interrogation records of these 5 people, see document -6387. After this paragraph, there was an appendix. The appendix was still full of all kinds of strange and scary photos, and a lot of miscellaneous items, such as the list of all the casualties, and so on. And for these, Fong Bujue also read them without missing a word. At this point, the record of the second experiment was announced. Brother Ju's mind had basically outlined the entire process of the incident. Nicholas. 2 seconds later, Fong Bujue looked at Nicholas again and said, The third experiment was carried out on the 5 of you, the survivors of the second experiment accident, right? Yes. Nicholas replied. I don't know why, but the bureaucrats in charge were paranoid that we had been infected by some kind of infection. They didn't dare to let us go back to work, and they felt that it would be a pity to kill us, so. He didn't finish his sentence, but the meaning was clear. Brother Jew muttered, and with a thoughtful expression, he picked up the 4th file. Then, at this moment, thump, 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 a series of very obvious, heavy footsteps came from the corridor outside. Hee hee, ha 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 ha, looks like I'm in luck. Nicholas couldn't help but laugh out loud almost at the moment when he heard the footstep. Shut up. Igor lowered his voice and shouted at the head beside him, or it doesn't matter. Nicholas interrupted. If it were someone else, maybe I'd listen to you, but this time it's the whispers, you're dead meat. Ha 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 ha. He suddenly laughed out loud, and at this volume, the person outside must have heard it. Give me the head, and stay away from the door. Seeing this, Feng Bujue immediately pocketed the remaining documents that he had not read. He stood up and said to Igor, Thank you, Igor. Igor followed Brother Jew's orders without question, so he quickly did as he was told. Thump, thump, thump. The footsteps came quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it reached the door and stopped as expected. What happened next was a little scary. A huge hand reached in from outside the door, grabbed the edge of the door, and then, squeak, woo, quang. The big hand tore the whole metal door from the door frame, like tearing the wrapping paper on a small box of yogurt, and threw it into the corridor. Then, in front of Feng Bujue and Igor, a monster about 2.5 meters tall and at least 300 kilograms appeared. Standing at this distance, they could clearly see that every piece of flesh on Dr. Andre's body had swelled to the point where it looked like it was about to burst, but there was not a trace of blood under his skin. Visually, he looked like a withered pomegranate. In general, the Whisperer was a deformed humanoid monster. Judging from its appearance, its combat power was much stronger than the mummified guy like Barefoot. Are there any fish that escaped the net? Andre could not see Igor in his line of sight, so after he tore the door open, he stared at Brother Jew and spoke. Be careful, there's still. Nicholas shouted the moment he saw Andre, trying to remind him of Igor's existence. Unfortunately, Screech, a scalpel, as soon as he said be careful, had already been inserted into his brain stem. Before Nicholas could finish his sentence, he had already died. Professor Andre. Feng Bujue very neatly stabbed the barefoot man, who was no longer of any use to him, to death. He told the monster at the door without a change in expression, I believe we should talk. Brother Jew's ability to adapt was extremely strong. As the saying goes, plans can't keep up with changes, but Feng Bujue was a person who could constantly make new plans according to the development of the situation. The moment he saw Dr. Andre, Feng Bujue immediately gave up the idea of letting Igor attack the monster. The instantaneous judgment told Brother Jew that if he fought with Andre here, he and Igor would die. Therefore, Feng Bujue changed his strategy and quickly got rid of Nicholas to prevent this guy from talking nonsense. At the same time, he immediately communicated with Andre in front of him to test the other party's reaction. Talk. Andre responded suspiciously. He stood at the door and looked at Brother Jew. Talk about what? Obviously, the doctor's AI was also very high. He stood there and did not enter the room because he clearly heard Nicholas shouting, There's still. Although he did not hear the whole sentence, from what he could infer, Nicholas was probably trying to tell him that there was something in the room that was harmful to him. On the other hand, Feng Bujue was even more astute. While he was talking to Andre, he threw away the head in his hand and turned slightly sideways. Using the action of wiping the blood on his clothes as a cover, he gestured to Igor to not act rashly and to remain invisible. Chapter 1142. It's nothing. Feng Bujua looked at Dr. Andre calmly and replied, I just want you to know that if you want to capture me for the ritual, I can cooperate with you. Andre looked at Brother Ju and thought for 2 seconds. Was it Nicholas who told you about the ritual? Haha, he told me a lot of things. Brother Ju used his special skill of mystifying things. You seem to be. Andre stared at Feng Bujua for a few seconds and said, Not normal. Why do you say that? Brother Ju asked. It's not surprising that ordinary people would scream or moan when they see me in this state, Andre replied. But I can't feel the slightest fear from your eyes. It's simple, because I'm also an experimental subject in this base. Feng Bujue gave this answer almost without thinking, and what I received was an experiment to erase fear. At this moment, let alone Andre, even Igor was fooled by him. Before this, Brother Ju only told Igor that he was also captured for an experiment, but he never mentioned what kind of experiment it was. But now the answer seemed to be revealed. Combined with his previous behavior and his current calm attitude, his answer was undoubtedly very convincing. Although Andre believed most of it, he still asked cautiously, How come I didn't know that there was such an experiment in the base? Who do you think you are? Feng Bujue replied. Are you the person in charge of all the plans here? Or are you the political commissar of the organization? Brother Ju combined the situation of the Soviet Union at that time and asked a question that left Andre speechless. Haha! Andre sneered and said, Then, can you explain, how did you subdue Nicholas? Also, before he died, he said, There's someone else in this room. What did he mean? VNO 9, Feng Bujue quickly replied again. Multitasking had always been Brother Ju's habit. While they were conversing, he had come up with many excuses. Therefore, facing any question, he was able to answer it smoothly. VNO 9. Judging from Andre's expression, he knew something about this. The plan to create super soldiers? That's right. I've injected myself with VNO 9 before, so my physical ability is slightly higher than the average person. As long as I use a sneak attack, it won't be too difficult to deal with Nicholas. Feng Bujue's nonsense came out of his mouth, and it was half true and half false, making it very difficult to distinguish. And what Nigel wanted to say to you before he died was, Be careful, there is a soldier injected with VNO 9 in this room. In terms of Chinese grammar, this sentence was actually a little awkward. According to our language habits, it was more like be careful, this person has been injected with VNO, or be careful, this person is a soldier who has been injected with VNO 9. However, from the perspective of Russian, this explanation seemed to make sense. Moreover, at that time, Nicholas only had his head left, and this head was in Feng Bujue's hand. In this case, Nicholas could neither use his hand to point nor turn his head to look. Under the premise that he couldn't point at a specific target, it made sense that he used, There's someone else in this room. I see. Andre was fooled. He responded, and after a few seconds of silence, suddenly, crackle, there was a burst of firecracker-like sound coming from his body. At the same time, the skin and flesh on Andre's body that had swelled to the limit suddenly shrunk at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, his entire body was like a deflated balloon, shrinking into a mummy like Nigula and the others. Seeing the change in Andre, one of Feng Bujue's doubts was dispelled. Previously, Nicholas had said that the Whisperers looked no different from us, but when Andre appeared, it was not the case. Now, Brother Ju understood the reason, and also what Andre meant when he said, I am in this state. Last question. After Andre completed his transformation, he asked, Why did you kill Nicholas immediately after I opened the door? Humph. Brother Ju put on a cold expression. From the moment you appeared, the situation was no longer under my control. I had just tortured Nigel. If I let him live, he would definitely say a lot of unfavorable things to me in front of you. He tilted his head, and a fanatical light flashed in his eyes. I don't want to die here. Compared to death, I'd rather take a gamble and accept the ritual. These words were also half true and half false, and there was no big loophole in his logic. After hearing this, Andre laughed and said, "Oh, it's about the same as what I thought." In this second, he finally revealed a smile that a monster should have, a strange, sinister smile. "Since that's the case, come with me." As he spoke, he leaned to the side and made a "please" gesture. "Okay, let me take something first." Fong Bujue took the opportunity to reply. This sentence was not only for Andre, but also for Igor. Because at this moment, Igor was standing between Brother Ju and the toolbox, and the thing that Brother Ju wanted to take was obviously the toolbox. "Take something?" Andre showed a suspicious look again. "What do you want to take?" He suddenly showed a somewhat ferocious look. "Don't tell me, after seeing that I've removed my previous form, you have the idea of sneaking up on me?" He sneered. "Haha. Although my appearance has changed, if you treat me as the same as Nigel, I'll be very troubled." "I didn't mean that," Fong Bujue replied. "It's just, these things are what I've collected before, such as tools, medical supplies, weapons, and so on. It's a pity to throw them away." "Whatever." Andre snorted coldly. "Anyway, when the inner you takes over the body, you'll realize how stupid your current thoughts are." 3 minutes later, Fong Bujue and Andre had already arrived at the ritual room. Along the way, Brother Ju walked in front with the toolbox, while Andre followed behind him vigilantly. 6 or 7 meters behind Andre was Igor, who was quietly tailing them. Igor's tracking skills were not outstanding, but fortunately, when Andre walked, every step he took would make a bang sound, as if his skinny body was still bearing the weight of the monster form just now. In short, as long as one did not deliberately make any noise, one would not be discovered on the auditory level. As for the visual level, even if Andre looked back, he could not see Igor, so there was nothing to worry about. "So, should we start now?" Fong Bujue put down the toolbox and the documents in his arms on the ground, then looked at Andre and asked. At that moment, Brother Ju was standing at the edge of the cement platform, and Andre was 2 meters away from him. Igor, with Brother Ju's signal, stood at the door to watch. "You just need to go up." Andre pointed at the cement platform. "Can I stand?" Fong Bujue asked as he stood up. "Yes," Andre replied. "As long as you are on top of the magic circle." After Fong Bujue stood up, he used a condescending gaze to ask calmly, "The people who came for the ritual earlier were forced to lie down because they refused to go up, right?" "Haha. That is one of the reasons." Andre smiled again, but this time, there was a hidden danger in his smile. Fong Bujue did not ask what the second reason was because he knew. He would soon experience the answer himself. 2 seconds later, Andre asked, "I still haven't asked for your name." "Fong Bujue," Brother Ju answered. "Okay, let us begin. Fong Bujue." At this point, Andre slowly raised both of his arms. At that moment, the mutated monster revealed an extremely reverent gaze, and he started to chant a series of strange incantations. Even though the system did not translate the language he was using, Brother Ju could still tell that he was speaking Hebrew. Unfortunately, being able to tell did not mean that he could understand it. Just like how many people could differentiate between Spanish, Japanese, and French, even if they had not really studied these 3 languages. This is. About 10 seconds later, Fong Bujue, who stood on the cement platform, saw the magic circle under his feet glow. Almost at the same time, he was drenched. Why do I feel like I have just written a sentence that can easily be misunderstood? Blood seeped out from the surface of Fong Bujue's body. It seeped out from every inch of his skin and pores. Seeing this, Igor panicked. He was hesitating whether he should go forward to save Brother Jew or not. This feels not bad. Fong Bujua saw through Igor's thoughts, so he used a calm tone to say that to let Igor know that he was fine. But actually, Brother Jew was feeling very bad. It was not the kind of bad feeling where his body was sticky with blood, but the kind of bad feeling brought on by intense pain. He already understood why the other participants had to lie down. It was because they were in so much pain that they could not stand up. Only Brother Jew could stand and speak without a change in expression. Even Andre, who was chanting, had a change in expression when he heard Fong Bujue's words. He had not encountered something like this during a ritual before. The ritual lasted for about 3 minutes. Andre's chanting became softer and softer until it became an inaudible whisper. At this time, the blood on Fong Bujue's body had dried up. He was like a dehydrated plant, a mummy. The intense pain that seemed to come from the depths of his soul had also stopped. Instead, it was replaced by a strange feeling of pleasure and a strong urge to hurt his own body. Oh, I see. Brother Jew, who was in his mummy state, spoke with the same expression and tone as usual. As he spoke, he raised his hand and used his finger to cut off a piece of flesh from the left side of his face. This feels so King good. This made Igor break out in a cold sweat. He could not help but think, if Brother Feng's mind has turned into a demon and he tries to kill me. Igor did not even dare to think about what would happen next. To be fair, Igor was not afraid even when facing the Whisperer. However, if he were to face a mutated and hostile Fong Bujua, he would be scared to tears. Ha ha ha! A few seconds later, Andre let out a strange laugh, indicating that the chanting was over and the ritual was complete. Then, he said to Brother Jew, as expected, your soul and body are strong enough to bear the burden of the ritual. Fong Bujua stepped down from the cement platform. He lowered his head to look at his own body and mumbled weakly, now I know why all of you had to tear off your own clothes. They are so sticky and sticky. It is so uncomfortable. Ha ha! Andre laughed. What's the use of clothes? Skin, muscles, organs, bones, they are all meaningless. Before his voice trailed off, he casually tore off a piece of flesh from his shoulder. Our skin is just a shackle that binds us. It's just that we still need to use it to release our compatriots trapped in this world. You can do it. Fong Bujua did not seem to care much about Andre's words. When Andre was talking, Brother Jew had already walked to the toolbox, squatted down, and opened it. Andre was puzzled by Brother Jew's response and attitude. What's wrong with you? The Whispers were one of the stronger existences among these crazy mutated beings. They all retained part of the memory from the other world, so they could use spells and had higher intelligence. However, even Andre, who was a senior Whisperer, had never seen a case like Brother Jew, who did not seem to have any change in personality after being awakened. Nothing, I'm fine. Fong Bujua still used the same casual tone to reply to the man, and he did not stop what he was doing. Brother Jew took out all the VNO-9 from the toolbox, most of them were stored in test tubes or blood collection bags, and started to prepare for the injection. What are you doing? Andre stared at his strange compatriot in front of him, and he fell into a state of confusion. This was because in Andre's eyes, the toolbox was just a dark shadow. Andre knew very well that in Brother Jew's eyes, the toolbox was also just a dark shadow. What am I doing? Isn't it obvious? I want to strengthen my skin. As he spoke, Fong Bujua took out an oversized syringe. Don't ask me how big this thing is. When you see it, you will remember your childhood, and then you will want to cry. Of course, when you see it, your mind will be filled with strange images from movies. Then I suggest you go out for a walk, receive appropriate counseling, and stay away from crime, and started to extract the green liquid from the test tube. Chapter 1143. Enhanced. Andre was even more confused by Feng Bujue's behavior. You probably don't understand your current. My current state is indeed much more powerful than an ordinary person, but the flaw is also very obvious. Brother Ju did not intend to listen to Andre. He rudely interrupted him and quickly continued, in this state, part of the brain's potential is overloaded, causing the other parts of the brain to have problems. As he said this, he had already injected the first tube of VNO-9 into his vein and was preparing for the second tube. First of all, the sense of pain has disappeared. This important perception used to warn the body of danger has been transformed into meaningless pleasure. It's baffling. Secondly, the vision has been greatly limited. Basically, it has reached the point where it can say goodbye to most of the visible spectrum. Although it has far superior vision when facing most warm-blooded animals, overall, I think the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. Listening to Feng Bujue's description, Andre was shocked. You are a scientist? You're the scientist, Dr. Andre, Feng Bujue replied. You should be able to summarize the situation I've described. Unfortunately, the memory and thoughts of a whisperer have caused you to lose the wisdom and judgment that a human should have. At this point, he finished injecting the second tube and started the next one. What you're left with now is only your cunning personality and some witchcraft knowledge from the other world. The former won't be of much use in most situations. As for witchcraft, with your spiritual energy and the endurance of this skin, coupled with the premise that your vision is limited, the number of witchcraft spells you can cast in this world is limited. What exactly are you? Andre was shocked when he heard this. What exactly are you? He did not use who but what. This meant that he already had an answer in his heart, but he dared not believe it. You suspect that I'm a demon god? Feng Bujue still did not turn to look at Andre. He just continued with what he was doing. Haha, you're flattering me. I'm just an ordinary mutant at best, not even a whisperer. Therefore, I didn't get too many memories of Higgin. He paused for a moment. But the biggest difference between you and me is that you have always been locked in a cage, while I can come out from time to take a breather. What did you say? Andre was shocked. That's impossible. Yeah, I think it's unbelievable too, Feng Bujue said in a relaxed tone. Normally, the human brain can't handle this kind of burden. If the self in the cage escapes, the brain will have problems, and then it will cause all kinds of mental illness. He shrugged and smiled. I think, maybe I'm not a normal person. At this point, Feng Bujue had already injected all the VNO-9 he carried into his body. In any case, he was already in a mummified state. In this state, even if the VNO-9 worked on him, he wouldn't faint, he wouldn't die, he might even experience a strong sense of pleasure. So, a few seconds later, Andre probed. That's why you still have the ability to see your surroundings after being awakened? No, I can't see. Feng Bujue knew why Andre came to this conclusion, so he answered directly. I'm the same as you. The world in front of me only has cold light sources and dark shadows. As he spoke, he pointed at the toolbox in front of him. It's just that. I remember the position of every item in here. So, even if I close my eyes, I can complete the injection process at hand. Ridiculous. How can you remember? Andre was just about to refute Brother Ju's words, but halfway through, he stopped himself. Okay, let me take the things first. Not long ago, Feng Bujue's actions before he left the archive room flashed across Andre's mind. You at that time. The next second, Andre looked at Brother Ju with a shocked expression and muttered. That's right, at that time, I tidied up the toolbox a little. Feng Bujue replied with a smile. I spent a few seconds to confirm the position of the items I needed and put them in a place where they were easily accessible. While he was talking with Andre, Feng Bujue's body started to change. The VNO-9 seems to be working. Brother Jew suddenly changed the topic, and his expression changed slightly. This feeling. Haha. If I were still in a human state, I'd probably be struggling in pain right now. The subtext of his words was, I'm feeling so good right now. Asterisk gurgle gurgle. Asterisk as soon as Brother Jew finished speaking, a strange squirming sound came from his body. Since he was all skin and bones, the protruding veins under his skin were clearly visible. At that moment, his blood vessels were glowing brightly, and his whole body was like a glow stick. This state lasted for about 2 minutes. During this time, they could clearly see the light coming from Brother Jew's heart, spreading to all parts of his body, and then back to his heart. As the cycle increased, the light gradually became brighter and brighter, and then gradually faded and dimmed. Finally, before the light completely faded, Brother Jew's muscles and the moisture on his skin had returned to normal. As expected, it's back to normal. At this time, Feng Bujue spoke again with a smile. The effect of the supernatural mutation allowed the body to quickly adapt to the toxicity of the VNO-9, and the VNO-9 effect repaired the damaged functions of the brain. As he spoke, he turned to look at Igor, who was standing by the door. All right, my plan worked. Let's continue to look for the exit. Plan? Andrei suddenly turned around and followed Brother Jew's gaze. What plan? Who are you talking to? I don't need to report to you one by one. Feng Bujue gave Andrei a look of indifference. You're no longer of any use to me. If you don't want to die, stay away from me. Otherwise, I'll send you back to the other side to play. How dare you? Andrei had been suppressing a faint anger in his heart for a long time. At this time, he finally exploded. Who do you think you are? How dare you talk to me like that? Asterisk crackle. Asterisk as he scolded, Andrei transformed again. His body suddenly expanded, and in less than 5 seconds, he transformed into his previous monstrous form. You want to fight me? Feng Bujue squinted at him and sneered. You're like a fat pig taking a stroll in the butcher's house. Do you want to die? Chapter 1144. There was no doubt that Andrei had the upper hand in terms of size. But at this moment, the difference in strength between Feng Bujue and him was no longer something that could be made up for by the difference in size. In terms of raw strength, Brother Jew's strength and speed were a notch higher than Andrei's. Moreover, Brother Jew's combat experience and wisdom were far above Andrei's. This made this contest a no-brainer. Before Andrei could see Brother Jew's movements clearly, he was already on the ground. Then, he saw a shadow rapidly growing in size on his retina. Even when his skull was pierced, he still did not understand how he died. Humph! You can't even withstand a single blow. After Feng Bujue finished off his opponent, he put away his weapon and walked over to pick up the toolbox and documents on the ground as if nothing had happened. Brother Feng, you... Igor stood by the door and looked at Brother Jew with fear in his eyes. His expression showed that he was not confident. Don't worry. This was the sentence that Feng Bujue said to Igor the most today. I'm still me. Nothing has changed. But, just now you... Igor mustered up his courage and continued, have been turned into their kind. So what? Feng Bujue continued, my actions are determined by my will. Even if some kind of restriction in my mind has been removed, I will not succumb to instinct. In fact, even my instinct will not succumb to myself. Igor did not understand Brother Jew's words, but he had no reason to doubt him. Now, Feng Bujue had obviously recovered the vision of a normal person, which meant he could see Igor. And judging from Brother Jew's skills when he killed Andrei, Igor would not be able to resist no matter what Brother Jew wanted to do to him. Therefore, Feng Bujue had no reason to lie to him. Okay, Brother Feng. Igor scratched his head. I believe you're on the side of humans. Ha, humans, Feng Bujue said as he carried the toolbox and walked past Igor. I don't think I have the right to choose this side. I've always been on my own side. Other than that. He turned around and gave Igor a meaningful smile. You're the same as me. You're no longer a normal human. I hope you remember that. 5 minutes later, the two embarked on the journey to explore the base again. But this time, it was Feng Bujue's turn. At this point, he was finally able to relax along the way. He had successfully turned this nightmare mode scenario into a game with newbie difficulty. Even the boss of this scenario, Andre, had been killed by him, so how could he deal with the other sleep experiment mutants? Therefore, when Feng Bujue scouted ahead, he took out the document and read it as he walked. Previously, in the archive room, he had read a total of 3 documents. They were the Melior Project, and the experiment records of the first and second sleep experiments. This time, he flipped open the 4th document and saw Resurrection Wheel Project. Converting the Novgorod into a land vehicle and putting it back into use? Feng Bujue almost laughed out loud when he saw the outline of the project. Speaking of the Novgorod, it was indeed a great oddity in the history of human war. This shallow-water gunship from the Tsarist era had neither superior performance nor glorious battle results. But it was still famous all over the world because of its oddity. The Novgorod was circular. Its hull diameter was 30.78 meters, its draft was 3.67 meters, its standard displacement was 2,491 tons, and it was equipped with very powerful cannons. As you can imagine, it was basically a big bowl floating on the sea. Thanks to its unusual shape, the Novgorod, which had more than 3,300 horsepower, had a maximum speed of less than 7 knots, about 13 kilometers per hour. If the sea was calm, the speed of a human swimming in the sea would be about the same. In addition, every time this circular battleship fired its cannons, the entire ship would lose control and drift, due to the recoil. All in all, the facts proved that this thing should not have been created at all. Alright. I wish you success. Feng Bujue skimmed through the document and only felt that, if this plan was really implemented, it would at most create something similar to the underground base used by the villains in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it would be a simpler version. So, he continued to flip through. The 5th document was still not an experiment report, but a document that recorded a failed weapon project. This project was the legendary anti-tank dog project. This matter could be explained in a few sentences. During World War II, the Soviet Army tried to train military dogs to carry explosives to blow up tanks. In the end, during the actual operation, the dogs that were released from the trenches would often be frightened by the gunfire and run back. Then, the Soviet soldiers could only sigh before they were killed by the explosion. We are also King dogs. So, if you come out to run, you will have to pay for it sooner or later. Dogs are man's best friend, and people who betray their friends usually don't have a good ending. Is there really any meaning in keeping this kind of document? Feng Bujue cursed in his heart after he finished reading the record. Could it be to prevent some idiot from coming up with a similar anti-tank cat project one day? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but chuckle. Speaking of which, the most efficient one should be the anti-tank political commissar. Let them take the sticky bomb made by the British, also a funny invention in World War II, and counter it. Brother Feng. At this time, Igor, who was walking next to Brother Ju, noticed the change in his expression and asked curiously, "Is there anything funny recorded in this file?" It's nothing. I just happened to remember something funny. Feng Bujue didn't explain much to him, as he was afraid of hurting the feelings of his Soviet friends. So, he casually said something perfunctory and began to flip through the next document. This time, he finally saw the words, "The Third Sleep Experiment," in the title. Okay. Let me see. Brother Jew only took 2 seconds to read the summary and preparation section of the record. This time, the 5 people were all held in solitary confinement. After he browsed through the format and number of people in the experiment, he directly skipped to the section where the changes began. On the 7th day, Dr. Andre, who had been lying in bed for many days, showed an extremely anxious state and paced back and forth in the room. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.